An extras POV chapters 811 to 832. The fallen fort stood in the quiet of the late evening, its once proud walls and sophisticated structures now crumbled. The sun had set, and a pale moon cast a silvery glow over the scene, highlighting the devastation. The stone walls, once tall and strong, were broken in many places, with large gaps where the enemy's siege weapons had struck. Shards of unmelting ice littered the area, and broken pieces of technology was scattered all around. Inside the devastated fort, the courtyard was cleared of all the debris. Replacing the sullied flag of the Dwarven Republic, and the broken weapons that had been vandalized to ruin, were the giants who sat peacefully under the sky's blanket and the dim light of the stars. They waited there patiently, all of them like dogs. Their gaze was fixed on a rather tall makeshift tent that had been built for the purpose of their chief, the one that had given them such an outstanding victory. Ader himself. Give me your report. Ader sat on a rather comfortable chair, with Justin and Bell occupying his right and left sides respectively. Kneeling before him were the 5 Grand Knights of the Giants, and despite their clear subservience, they all seemed to be in an overly excited mood. And it was with this smile on their faces that they gave the report he requested. None of our own were killed, but many are currently injured. As for the monsters, they're all dead. Since they were at the front lines, they were mostly our meat shields and... Yeah, I understand. No need for the details. Ader raised his hand, forcing silence upon the giant mage. She happily complied, returning to her bowed posture. As Ader saw all of this, he smiled. I can already see what's going on in their minds, these simpletons. And it's not just them, either. Ader glanced at both Bell and Justin, and he was once again filled with amusement. The two of them were still recoiling from shock. I guess they didn't expect it would be that easy to take over the fort. Earlier that day, right after they took down the walls and began their attack on the fort, he could hear several giants sing his praise. None of that surprised him either. They've been trying to tear down those walls for over a century, after all. This is only the beginning. Ader rose to his feet after uttering this, his gaze resting on the Grand Knights that now devoted everything they had to him. I still have more to show you. They all raised their heads in surprise as he said this, their eyes full with expectation and wonder. Like little children, they drooled at the mere thought of what he desired to do next. This is the place that served as the graveyard for many giants for over a century, isn't it? Thousands upon thousands of your comrades fell here, all of them trying their best to break past the walls. Their constant engagement with the dwarves was what made the population of the giants so small. Well, that and their terribly primitive lifestyle, which featured several unhealthy choices. All of that was going to change under his guidance, though. Follow me, everyone. He floated off, leaving the tent for the darkness awaiting him outside. Let me show you a bit of my power. Look at them. Ader was currently hovering above thousands of giants, all of their eyes on him. The cold evening breeze caused his black hair to dance about him, as his suit flapped in the air. Justin and Bell stood in front of the crowd, seated on the shoulder of the previous chief of the giants. I suppose I should begin. Ader cast his gaze away from them and focused his attention on the wreckage of the walls, and plain lands that existed beyond them. He had intentionally brought everyone here for one major purpose. This is the perfect place to use what I've been saving up for a while now. Extending his palm forward, Ader conjured what appeared to be a pitch-black orb, one that constantly warbled, with purple energy glowing with every hum. All eyes were on him, but he ignored everyone and focused on the thing he had just manifested. I've been stuffing most of my energy in this for months now. All my excesses and unused energy went into it, yet it only amounts to this much. It was pathetic by Ader's standards, but he reckoned it would be just enough to get the job done. Ancient Magique. Chaos art. Inhaling deeply, he let the orb float off from his hands and ascend to the sky. Hollow technique number 1, empty shell. As soon as he uttered those words, everything in the world around Ader as well as the giants fell into darkness. It almost seemed as though the black orb had expanded to surround everyone and everything for miles. Everyone was stuck and blind in the pitch-black world, forced to lay eyes on the only thing that was generating light. The orb itself. It screamed with bright purple light, and with its scream, it sent its vile content into the earth. The ground rumbled as it received all of its excess energy. Cold chills far colder than anything the night had to offer began to spread through the bodies of all who witnessed this. They kept their eyes peeled until the last of the orb's energy was drained to the ground. Then, the true horrors manifested. The ground began to pulsate with false life, creating bright purple cracks on the floor. It trembled. It felt alive, no, more like something beneath it was alive. "Come forth, empty ones. Shell soldiers." Ader whispered with upward curled lips, forcing the entities buried underneath rock and debris. They all dug their way up, thousands of them. The fallen giants of the recent past, as well as the dead monsters that were lost during the recent assault, all of them were brought back in Ader's glory. They all had darkness shrouding them, manifesting purple energy around their pale bodies as they rose from their graves. Everyone's eyes widened in amazement as they witnessed this gloriously perverse sight. Thousands of undead were manifest, just from Ader's single command, and the giants were forced to cheer and bow in worship of their great leader. Not yet. His voice stopped them from going any further. He glanced at them with amused eyes, revealing something that they had never thought was even conceivable. "Your celebrations are premature." Rumble. 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 Tremors much louder and more intense than the ones from earlier echoed out. They didn't stop. Louder and louder, they rang and pierced the night. Then, from the very depths of the earth, more hands began to claw their way out. This time, they emerged in their tens of thousands, rising from sediments that had formed over decades. They were not the recently deceased, but fallen ancestors whose rotting bodies and bones were now being regenerated by the power that only one man wielded. "Here at last," Ader said with a satisfied smile. The battlefield was now littered in a storm of death and chaos, as over 100,000 giants stood tall and proud. Then, they all bowed to him. Justin, Bell, and all of the other giants felt their bodies tremble as they witnessed all of this. They couldn't believe their eyes, and before they knew it, they all bowed as well. Ader watched all of this silently, standing above everything like a god. "All preparations have been made. This should be fun. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. I certainly know I did. Apologies that there's no mass release. I made the chapters longer than usual, so I hope I am forgiven. The next day. HAAA. Councilman Finn stood right among his subordinates atop the fortress city's innermost battlement as he looked ahead at the other two that served to protect him and the rest of the city from what was expected to arrive on that dreary day. His loud sigh properly encapsulated how he felt about the matter. Not good. My sector is internal security management. I shouldn't be doing this, but... Someone among the members of the Senate had to stand up, and apparently, he was the only one with a backbone when it came to actual warfare with the giants. The rest of the Senate had chosen to stay in the central city and coordinate their troops from that safe distance. Councilman Finn wasn't complaining too much, though. If this leads to victory, it will be a good opportunity to weed out some of the useless members of the Senate and consolidate a lot of powers into only a select few offices. Most importantly, he could finally be president. All of that has to be suspended, though. Right now, I should focus on the battle. Looking around him, the councilman took a good look at the fortress city and its current condition. This place remained a marvel of dwarven engineering and resilience. It was a sprawling stronghold with walls of deep metallic stone so thick and tall they seemed an extension of a mountain itself. The architecture was both functional and awe-inspiring, with every stone meticulously placed by master stonemasons. The outermost circular battlement wall encircled the city like a protective embrace, its ramparts bristling with war machines and guarded by vigilant dwarven soldiers. Within the main wall, 2 inner battlements rose, each offering another layer of defense. The first inner wall, slightly lower than the main wall, was heavily fortified with towers at regular intervals. These towers, square and robust, housed ballistae and catapults, ready to unleash a rain of projectiles on any approaching enemy. The second inner wall was the final bastion, enclosing the heart of the city where the great hall and forges lay. This wall was the tallest and most impenetrable, with battlements so high they provided a commanding view of the surrounding plains. This was where Councilman Finn stood, watching from a distance what would come to attack this highly strategic stronghold of the dwarves. This place is instrumental in creating our weapons and machines of war. If it goes down, not only would the giants be able to advance further into the central city, but the loss would badly affect us in our war with the dragons. There was a reason this was the most fortified city in the entire Dwarven Republic. I can't allow it to fall, no matter what. On the main battlement wall, a line of dwarves stood, their silhouettes stark against the evening sky. Clad in gleaming mechanical armor, each soldier held powerful ranged weapons like mana blasters, while having an axe stuck to their side, and shields stationed behind them, just in case they needed to go into melee. All their bearded faces were set with grim determination as they waited for the enemy. None of their stances wavered as they gazed out over the plains that stretched endlessly before them. The sky was tinged with the deep red of sunset, casting long shadows across the land and highlighting the tension in the air. Beyond the battlements, the plains were vast and open, a natural killing field for any advancing army. The dwarves could see any distant campfire, or even the slightest advance from the enemy from miles away. As such, even if the number of giants were absurdly high, they were confident enough to whittle down the number before the army could get too close. Just to be safe, we upscaled our estimation of their numbers to 50,000. Councilman Finn leaked out another sigh as he finished observing everything and everyone around him. I've left the command of certain aspects of the battle to the few competent councilmen I trust, though they'll be doing it remotely. It was unfortunate that their competence did not help at all with their cowardice. In any case, we've made all the preparations we could possibly make in such a limited span of time. Thankfully, this place remains an optimal place to take on an army no matter the size. The walkways of the battlement were very wide, allowing troops to move swiftly to reinforce any section under threat. Enchanted torches mounted on the walls cast a warm, flickering light, illuminating the determined faces of the defenders. Not only that, but the very material of every structure was made of the highest grade. They spared no expense. In the center of the battlements, an enormous gatehouse loomed, its iron-bound doors shut tight. All in all, the fortress stood ready, its walls and defenders ready for the coming storm. Unfortunately, no amount of preparation could have prepared them for what their eyes were about to witness. Shua. The brilliant evening suddenly began to darken at a rapid rate thanks to the dark clouds that began to cluster before the dwarves. These dark clouds were so thick that no light could penetrate their dense canopy, and not only did the cluster seem to be growing larger, but it was advancing towards the city at a frighteningly fast pace. In no time, it would have completely consumed the skies above the city and engulfed everything in darkness. However, it stopped. Councilman Finn's eyes widened as he witnessed the approaching dark clouds suddenly halt. The cluster simply hovered above the battlefield, stagnantly painting the grounds with sheer blackness devoid of light or color. Before anyone, including Finn, could process why this happened, or what this darkness really was, they were bombarded with yet another strangely ominous sight. On the ground, beneath the blackened skies, a purplish-black pool swelled. Its contents spilled over the earth, like a dark swamp. It looked obscene, and it felt even worse. Almost like the very definition of corruption, this blackened pool of purple completely covered the ground before the first battlement, with all the dwarves there holding their breath, not blinking their bloodshot eyes as they waited for what would come next. And, what exactly came next? Well, it was death. My goodness. This is. Councilman Finn could not believe his eyes as he watched the whole thing from his distance. He was currently seeing through an enchanted item, so he could witness everything in great detail, and even he doubted what he was seeing. Could such a thing be? Absolutely not. It couldn't be allowed. After all, emerging from the depths of the dark swamp were creatures of death, who had been granted some kind of twisted false life. Undead giants and monsters all in various forms and sizes began to appear in their thousands. They seemingly poured out without end, like a swarm of insects that didn't seem to stop. Councilman Finn was stunned for a moment, even going as far as gulping once he realized he was already shivering. However, he quickly took a hold of himself. He wasn't like the cowards whom he had criticized both internally and externally so many times. He was better. Attack! Attack now! He roared, his voice amplified by yet another enchanted item. After he said this, there was a second of silence, a delay in the response time of the equally stunned dwarves who were still trying to get their wits about them. However, this decorum was soon shattered by the deafening eruptions of blasters and cannons all fired at the enemies that were spawning. This resulted in explosions that permeated the air, getting rid of the stale silence. More. More and more. And even more explosions were dealt to the enemy. The spawning undead were torn asunder by the heavy blasts that rushed upon them. Their arms, legs, chests, heads, etc., were all blown away as the constant barrage consistently fired and kept devastating the enemies. Smoke and flames littered the ground, and the constant vibrations both from the air and earth surface showed just how much devastation was being caused. Still, the blasts went on and on. After about a minute of constant firing, though, the battlefield slowly began to fall silent. Once another minute passed, it went completely quiet. Why? Well, the weapons were either on cooldown, or they needed to be reloaded. As a result of this, other than the clearing smoke and vanishing flames in the battlefield, no sound was being made. Everyone simply did their best to reload and wait for the cooldown to elapse. Unfortunately, what? The undead giants and monsters that emerged from the dissipating smoke were even more than before. Not just that, but even more were emerging from the black swamp. Then, they began their charge. In their massive horde, the monstrosities raced towards the walls of the battlement, causing constant rumbles to echo into the air as they lifelessly commenced assault. Their glowing eyes teemed with bloodlust, and their soulless faces screamed of impending destruction. Then, before long, they made their first impact. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. I quite enjoyed this one. They got us. Councilman Finn's face was littered with beads of sweat as he carefully observed the battlefield. Using undead, this was not only unexpected, but completely unaccounted for in our plan against the giants and monsters that we were told about. Unlike living creatures, undead felt no pain. They also didn't perish until you got rid of their core. As such, their blasters would only slow them down at best, and unless they were able to fully destroy the body of an undead or completely incapacitate them, their efforts were simply in vain. If we had more time and distance between us, this wouldn't be such a big issue, but it seemed they already accounted for that. Why else would the enemy cause their forces to spawn right in front of the first battlement? We've lost our advantage. Councilman Finn clenched his fist as he glared at the monsters who now neared the battlement with little to no resistance stopping them. It made him even more anxious. They made us exhaust our first round of attack before making their move, which means we're currently sitting ducks. Even if the blasters can be reloaded in time, the larger cannons need time to cool. Those blasters could be enough to slow down monsters and giants, but not undead. And it wasn't just because of their tenacity. The miasma, it's weakening the impact of our attacks. That pool of death, it's a big problem. Not only were their attacks rendered less effective as a result of the black swamp, but any time they took down an undead, or gravely injured one, the swamp sucked them in and spat out even more able-bodied and powerful undead. Is the swamp repairing the undead, or does it just have many undead within it? How does it even work? Unfortunately, they didn't have the luxury to think about any of those at the moment. After all, boom. The undead were already ramming at the gates. Boom. Each attempt to tear down the gates caused a deafening roar to burst into the air. These creatures were using their very bodies as cannons or whatever was necessary to tear asunder the soul barrier that stood in their way. Just from the way the first couple of impacts sounded, it was clear that it was only a matter of time before they broke through. This would have been the time for melee, but due to the dense miasma, that isn't even an option. Councilman Finn gritted his teeth and frowned even deeper than before. We have technology for handling that, but we weren't expecting any undead armies, so we didn't bother bringing it with us. Transporting it and preparing it for use now would take too much time. Plus, once again, the dwarf leader cast his gaze on the blackened battlefield. I don't think we can handle something of this magnitude. It was too much. Any further engagement would only lead to the pointless deaths of dwarves, and that was the last thing Councilman Finn desired. Retreat. Abandon the first battlement. He gave his order in a loud roar. This was the most optimal solution he could think of in such a short span of time, and this was for multiple reasons. We need time. The first walls won't hold them down for too long, but it'll be enough to make the proper preparations to counter them. By retreating, none of the dwarves would have to die needlessly too. There's nothing they can do to stop them at this point. Abandoning the first battlement was, of course, not without its consequences too. There's no time to transport them, so we'll have to let go of the cannons and every other artillery that we've stationed there. Councilman Finn planned to initiate self-destruct sequences for all their weapons at just the right time, so they could take out as many enemies as possible, some kind of last-ditch effort to make the first battlement useful before the undead reached the second one. At this point, this is the best choice to make. Just as instructed, the dwarves all abandoned their posts and hurried to the second battlement. There were tethers that could cause them to travel to the second battlement at high speeds almost akin to teleportation. As such, evacuation didn't take too long at all. All right? Now that we're done evacuating, we should have a few minutes to catch our breath and come up with a more effective strategy for the enemies. Since they would be attacking from the gates, it meant they would be spilling into the open area from a very closed-off space. That would mean they couldn't overwhelm them with their numbers. We can take them out as they appear in smaller numbers, thanks to the gate limiting how many can invade at a time. The councilman smiled, nodding to himself as he desired to further plan how to go about it. Unfortunately, his entire thoughts were halted in their tracks. After all, what is that? Emerging from the dark swamp were a group of colossal creatures, entities larger than anything Councilman Finn had ever seen face to face in his life. He recognized them, though. Dragons. This group of dragons, 6 of them with 4 horns, while a bunch of others with 3 all opened their massive jaws and let out crackles of power that converged in a single location. This group of 15 dragons all gathered their energies in a single place, causing the swirling storm of multicolored energies all trapped in a purple layer of repulsive light only grew larger and larger. Until, it became even larger than the dragons themselves. And no. No way. Councilman Finn already knew what would happen the moment he witnessed the ever-expanding orb that was now being aimed. No! As soon as he screamed, the blast was sent straight towards the sturdy battlement gates. There was no resistance at all. Boom! The gates melted instantly, before being dispersed very easily like they were nothing but chaff. That wasn't all, though. The blast began to move, thanks to the dragon's changing aim, and rest of the battlement soon crumbled under the destructive impact of the powerful ray. In one single moment, less than a minute after the retreat. Hey. The first battlement fell. Asterisk. A/N. Thanks for reading. This battle just makes me excited for some reason. Also, I think I'll have to postpone my mass release till next month. Too many reasons I have to stop. Ruins. That was the current state of the first battlement. There was barely any rubble left after the destruction, and the sheer destruction was more than enough to allow the undead ones to advance freely. There was no need to be confined to a gate when the walls had been completely torn down. H-A-A-A. Councilman Finn was left speechless as he witnessed their first line of defense absolutely obliterated, a damage far greater than anything he could have ever expected. That blast, it destroyed everything. They didn't even care about their troops standing in the way. Finn wasn't completely sure before, but after seeing all of this, he had to make the conclusion that the enemy wasn't the giants. There's someone else behind this. But who? He had no time to even think about that, and even if he did, there were no clues. All he knew about the enemy was what currently lay before him, the fact that they were bountiful and incredibly powerful. And that they weren't stopping. Even now, despite all the destruction, the Black Swamp was still spitting out so many giants and monsters, and they were rushing towards the second battlement. They'll reach here in less than a minute at this rate. There was no time to think of a proper formation or enact an intelligently made strategy. Before that could be done, the enemy would have closed in on them, and it would be too late. We have no choice. We have to utilize our last-ditch melee efforts. Finn thought to himself, ready to yell out his orders. But, something was making him hesitate. Those undead dragons. His eyes focused on them as he tried to quell his slight shivers. Why aren't they moving or doing anything? The monstrosities merely stood at the center of the blackness, watching the second battlement, which was within range of their powerful blasts, yet did not take any action at all. Is it because they are aware of our anti-projectile barrier? Or, are they trying to gauge our level of defense? It didn't seem like either of those options, though. From what he could decipher from their lifeless eyes, they merely seemed uninterested in the fight as a whole. But why? I'm not even sure our anti-projectile barrier can take one of their blasts, let alone a barrage of those blasts. Could it be that they could only do that once? No. I can't assume that. It doesn't even seem like it took them much of an effort to do it. If they could just tear down their battlements, why weren't the dragons doing so? They're looking down on us, aren't they? At this point, the councilman was livid with unbridled rage. Fine, then. I'll show you why we've been able to survive and overcome the dragons, giants, and every other aggressor that we've ever faced. Raising his hands, he yelled as loud as he could. Release the A-51S, B-12S, and C-8S. As soon as he uttered those words, a massive hole appeared right in front of the second battlement. It was a spatial gate that was linked to another location. And emerging from these gates were the new fighters that the dwarves were now employing for their task. The foot soldiers A-51 golems and B-12 automatons were massive and nearly as tall as the approaching undead giants. As for aerial support, the C-8 flying drones swarmed the sky like a host of massive dragonfly-shaped insects. This was the culmination of the mechanical engineering of the dwarves for so long, the way to engage in warfare without any potential loss on their end. Golems had to be controlled by their respective pilots, though this could be done remotely. Automatons didn't require control, since specific instructions could be programmed into them, so they could respond to various things in battle. As for the flying drones, they were a kind of hybrid. While they were generally automated, a pilot could take charge of them in order to engage specific targets or perform a unique function. All of them also had self-destruct sequences, which served as a last-ditch effort to take down the enemy. They're all expensive to make, considering how powerful they are, so self-destruct would be too wasteful. But, it doesn't seem like there'll be much of a choice right now. Councilman Finn resolved himself to do what was necessary once the time came. He knew what was at stake if he didn't. The golems and automatons looked identical, though the latter was bulkier due to the presence of several nerve synapses and a need for higher processing power. They were all made of metal and covered in runes, which served to enhance their offensive and defensive capabilities overall. Each golem and automaton was armed with sufficient weapons, both melee and ranged, to be formidable in combat, while the drones were purely for ranged attacks. If their weaponry wasn't enough, the drones would be sent crashing down and exploding like small, but powerful bombardments falling from the sky. Using this method, for sure they would be able to whittle down the enemy forces. For sure. Moments later. What is going on here? Despite the rounds of bombardments and self-destruct sequences, the undead didn't seem to be reducing in number at all. They just continued to relentlessly advance towards the second battlement. This is bad. Councilman Finn was slowly beginning to panic. Despite his best attempts to hide his nervousness, he couldn't help but bite his nails and continuously shake under heavy pressure. Where is backup? Why can't the backup arrive? He barked out loud, despite already knowing full well the reason. The deputy beside him heard this query and reminded him of what he already knew. They are also under heavy attack in their respective cardinal points, sir. Every area is fully occupied, and they're also requesting backup. Councilman Finn felt like ripping out his beard once he heard this. Damn it. Was it a mistake to divide our forces to the 4 cardinal points of the city just in case of a spread-out assault? No, that was the right call. If they didn't do that, then the other parts of the city that was left unguarded would have been breached, and they would be in an even worse off situation. Damn it. The golems, automatons, and drones were already out of ammunition and were engaging in their self-destruct sequences, but that would only temporarily hold back the enemies. Without anything more to stop them, the enemy would inevitably attack and break through the second battlement. Councilman Finn knew this, and he had to make a decision as quickly as possible regarding their next move. HAAA. Visible breath escaped his lips as he sighed. He already knew the only way out. Everyone, retreat. Retreat to the third battlement. The dwarves obeyed, using the tether to retreat to the highest and most fortified wall of the 3. Once again, this decision saved their lives. The undead dragons summoned their powerful breaths and brought down the second battlement walls just as easily as they did the first, granting passage to the ever-growing undead army that rose from the rapidly expanding black swamp. There really was no escape. They had reached the last end of their rope. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I know, don't worry. This won't drag out for much longer. HAAA. Councilman Finn was struggling to breathe as he laid eyes on the world beyond the tall walls that he stood on. The undead giants and monsters had surrounded the final battlement, spreading from all the cardinal locations, leaving no room for escape. Not only that, but the dragons suddenly ascended to the sky, hovering all around the city, like vultures, waiting for the death of a fatally wounded animal. It seemed inevitable that they would lose. That they would die. The final battlement that once seemed tall and impregnable now began to look brittle in the eyes of the dwarves that prayed it would hold in this moment of adversity. The technologies they had put so much faith in had failed them, and now they were helpless. The only other option they had was to keep firing their useless cannons, or for the dwarven warriors to finally enter the battlefield and engage their enemies in melee combat. They were donning mech suits, so perhaps they had a chance. However, the overflowing miasma clearly meant a death sentence to any dwarf who had a prolonged battle with the undead. Is this the end? As Councilman Finn muttered this, the most unexpected thing happened. The undead soldiers stopped, all of them as if they were locked in a single frame in time. Then, they fell to their knees. What? Councilman Finn did not understand what was happening yet, but his eyes soon picked up something in the distance that made him slightly comprehend. All the hovering dragons went to that location where the clouds were darkest and began to dance around it. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and purple lightning sparked in the blackened clouds. All to pay homage to what was coming. Rumble. The dwarves felt the tremors from where they stood on the walls. Their bodies followed accordingly, as they all shook in fear. Their eyes were wide open as they watched the army that emerged from seemingly nowhere. They were at a distance, beyond the black pool of energy, but they were steadily approaching the third battlement with such tremendous pressure that it felt unreal. Those are. Councilman Finn's eyes witnessed the most unexpected sight ever. About 30,000 giants were approaching, each of them riding a monster like it was a steed. They donned armor that seemed enchanted, with battle-hardened expressions and a formation that oozed intelligence. They were also equipped with varying weapons that seemed too sophisticated to have been made by their primitive minds. Then, at the forefront of this army were 5 grand knights. They had unique colors, and the armor they donned was of a completely different quality from the other giants. Not only was it superior in terms of power, but it looked more regal. 4 of the 5 knights carried a particular throne from different sides, holding it up with reverence, while the final one, a female mage, stood behind and walked with her head slightly bowed. Councilman Finn stared hard at the man who sat on the throne, but only confusion greeted the poor dwarf once he laid eyes on him. Who is that? Their leader? But that is. The one who sat on the throne was a human, or rather, he resembled one. He had red hair, with a fully black suit. His crimson eyes glowed with malevolence, and his ebony face was filled up with his amused smile. How was a human leading giants? It made no sense at all. No, perhaps it did. If the humans are colluding with giants, it would explain their sudden rise in intelligence. I should attribute the use of formations, monsters, and even dragons to, wait, no, that can't be right. There was no way humans could even broker a deal with giants, talkless of being resourceful enough to push the dwarves so far. They're struggling with the war on their own continent, aren't they? How could they possibly fare any better against us? The giants and monsters up ahead aren't undead. They must be the main army. Councilman Finn thought to himself with gritted teeth, already understanding their strategy. They planned to wear us out with their dispensable undead army, while only appearing once we didn't have much left in our arsenal. There was a reason they kept their distance as well. They could just command the dragons to tear down the walls, or command the undead army to keep marching on and attack, yet, they're all on standby. Initially, Finn thought this was a flaw in their plan, but he knew better now. They already know they've won. The undead army was invincible, and now they had surrounded the fortress city. The dark swamp had also covered the surrounding lands in its black muck. There was no escape in sight, and the enemy already knew that. It was their plan all along. What can we do now? I don't know. If they chose to keep fighting, only death would await them. However, if they didn't fight, then the dwarven civilization was as good as done for. At this point, Councilman Finn forgot about his political ambitions, letting go of all his motivations to keep up his composure. Falling to his knees, trembling with wide, teary eyes, he couldn't help but sob. He finally felt the cowardice that overwhelmed his colleagues. Is this really the end? Meanwhile, the Senate was chock full of its members, save for Councilman Finn, who chose to lead the people on the battlefield. A few dwarves had initially felt bad they didn't do the same, but after seeing the current state of the battlefield, they were glad regarding their choice. What should we do now? Are we screwed? This is terrible. We're done for. As they kept up their lamentations, two human silhouettes suddenly manifested from out of nowhere. Greetings, dwarven leaders. The moment the feminine voice echoed within the room, all the dwarves fell into decorum as they gazed with shock at the direction of the sound. Standing there was a girl with blonde hair, and a boy with dark brown hair. They were barely adults, but there was a mature air around them, particularly with the way they smiled at them. My name is Belle, and this is my partner Justin. As they said this, their smile only widened more. Tension filled the air as their words echoed across the hall. We come in peace. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Looks like checkmate to me, doesn't it? Perfect decorum. No one uttered a single word as they witnessed the two humans introduce themselves. Perhaps it was because they understood that underestimating them would lead to no positive outcome. The mere fact that they were able to approach the Senate so quietly had to mean they could bypass all the security measures and protocols that had been put in place throughout the building. Even now, with them being in the meeting hall, none of the defense protocols were activating. Why? The dwarves didn't even know they were present until they heard their voices. Just how sneaky were they? How long had they been in the hall? They couldn't answer those questions, and so much more, which made them quietly stare at the boy and girl. All the leaders had one thought in their head. Who are they, really? We come with a message from Ader, presiding chief of the giants. The last time a letter was sent, you killed one of his messengers, so I'd advise you to be a lot less impatient with your decisions this time. This time, it was the boy who spoke. He had a letter with him, and a bright smile on his handsome face. The dwarves were still recoiling from confusion, particularly Councilman Frank. He had indeed been informed of giants who approached the walls with a letter from a certain Ader, but he just assumed that there was no such person, and that the giants were merely seeking another way to attack. He remembered being amused by the rather unique choice of the giants, but he didn't think anything more about it before telling his subordinates to attack with full force. So. Ader was real. A bead of sweat fell from Councilman Frank's face immediately. In a way, all of this war and mayhem was his fault. If he had just listened to the giants back then, accepting their letter of goodwill, perhaps things wouldn't have escalated to such a level. Fuck. This is bad. He stared at his fellow dwarven leaders, but it seemed none of them had thought of things to that point. He was probably One look at the two humans told him that he wasn't out of the woods just yet. The boy and girl were staring directly at him, with knowing eyes and cunning smiles that told him that they knew exactly what he was thinking. They were aware of his carelessness. Now then. I shall read the letter. Belle said, her smile broadening as Justin passed her the letter. Greetings, dwarven leaders. My name is Ader, and I desire peace between both giants and dwarves, all leading up to an alliance with my master. Of course, I understand there will be pushbacks, which might spiral into acts of violence. But rest assured, you will accept this proposal one way or the other. The choice is in your hands right now. If you choose peace, and by extension an alliance, the Dwarven Republic will be spared from annihilation. I also promise to assist you with the scarcity problem you have, and offer support regarding the Dragon War with the resources at my disposal. She paused for a second, observing the reactions of the dwarves. Really? He'll help with the scarcity issue? Hold on, how does he know about that? Does that even matter? How can we even trust him? He'll assist us with the dragons too. This is too suspicious, isn't it? Who is his master? As they murmured among themselves, Belle and Justin shot themselves a knowing look. They already knew this would happen. But if you refuse this offer, there will be dire consequences. As soon as Belle said this, every dwarf fell quiet instantly. Their faces seemed to ask the same question. What consequences? For starters, all of you here will be killed. The Senate will then be replaced by more sensible leaders who know the best choice for their republic. Their faces went pale instantly. One way or the other, the dwarves will be allied with the giants and serve my master. If you know what's best for you, it's best you accept very quickly before I have to resort to more convincing methods. The dwarves all glanced at the large screen that floated above their table, which displayed the current state of the battlefield. At this point, it was clear that Ader, leader of the giants, was phenomenally stronger than what they had ever expected. He was too strong for them to stand against using conventional means. Still, what he was asking for was too much. You make valid points. It's true we have been outdone by this Ader person. The person who spoke was the leader of the scientific and technological advancement sector. He tilted his goggles as he spoke. However, he made one small oversight. He sent just the two of you to deliver his letter. Do you really think we'll let you walk out of here after coming into our territory like this? Druryeg. That very instant, a blaring alarm spread within the massive hall, with bright red lights filling the air. In a flash, several machineries appeared all over the room, specifically drones and automatons. We can just capture you two and use you as leverage. The crazy dwarf grinned. A hostage situation, eh? Exactly. He turned towards the boy who spoke. Or are you saying this Ader person doesn't care about your lives? In that case, should you really be working for him? At this point, the two humans looked at each other with barely contained grins. Well, he does care about our lives. Despite putting us through all kinds of things, he has made it clear that he will protect us from any harm that would kill us. Then, that means you're valuable. Ha ha ha. The dwarf grinned maniacally, ordering his machines to close in on the two. Fools. You should have pretended to be dispensable. As he laughed, with the other leaders, particularly Frank, still conflicted about what to do, Justin and Belle retained their aloof expressions. Why, though? This question from the blonde girl caused the dwarven leader to cease laughing, slightly confused by their overly calm demeanor. You dwarves don't stand a chance against us. If you did, Ader wouldn't have told us to deliver the message. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. He 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 he. Well. Gaping mouths from all the spectating dwarves faced the two humans who stood among a pile of automaton and drone parts. It's just as I said. You dwarves don't stand a chance. They were completely unscathed, smiling ever so confidently as if the several high-end specialized machines that were thrust at them were nothing but small fry. Despite some of the reservations that the dwarven leaders had regarding the two, they never expected mere humans to stack up so well against their creations. Yet, what was this? Justin and Belle had disconcerted expressions as they looked at the dwarves, who were now pale with fear. They recognized the consequences of their actions, and none of them wanted to face them. Certainly not Councilman Frank. Please spare us. I'm willing to cooperate. He stepped forward, swallowing what was left of his pride as a bead of sweat fell from his face. The two humans looked at him with a smirk, and while he despised the smugness they displayed towards him, he couldn't help but swallow his grievances and give a rubbery smile. Frank. Are you serious right now? You'd sell your own people to save yourself. What are you thinking? Shut it, you old farts. Frank yelled out, his voice causing every single voice of criticism to cease. All the leaders stared at him with shock, completely taken aback by his tone. Frank wasn't done, though. Do you think we have a choice here? We'll be killed if we resist. Our people will needlessly suffer, and we'll continue to experience this until we finally give in. It wasn't just him that recognized this, was it? The dragons are still on our case, and our resources diminish with every passing moment. These people are offering to help us with that, but only if we cooperate. He added. The alternative is conflict, and can we really afford to allocate more resources to fight? If they don't destroy us first, the dragons will. The way Frank saw it, this was checkmate from the start. I do this not just for my sake, but for the sake of the dwarven race. If you love our people, you should all let go of your pride and do the same. Frank still felt a bitter sting in his heart, as well as a rising apprehension, anytime he remembered the huge mistake he made with the giants who first delivered Ader's letter. If only I had been this rational back then. He once again glanced at the two humans, and they met his gaze with amused grins and slow nods. It seems they'll keep my secret now that I'm on their side. He didn't want to betray his colleagues like this, but there was no other way to go about things. Perhaps they could overthrow this Ader and his master sometime into the future, but until then. I also concede. I understand. I won't resist any longer. Me too. Surrender was the only option. In merely a few seconds, joining the wreckage of metal and ores that were scattered all over the floor, the dwarven leaders knelt and bowed their heads in obeisance. Now that's more like it. Belle beamed sweetly, and so did Justin. They both seemed glad by the change of heart, not that they had any doubt of it ever going sideways. After all, Ader had already informed them of the situation with Frank, and how his cooperation would be instrumental in garnering the surrender of the remaining dwarves. They belong to a collectivist society. Even if all of them are thinking the same thing, no single one will want to step forward first. That will label them as a scapegoat, an initial traitor. Which is why an additional, personal incentive must be given to one of them in order to make them take that leap of faith. Once one steps forward, the others will follow suit. Was what Ader told them when they asked how the whole thing would go. They had also made a follow-up question regarding the incentive to be used, but he only chuckled at their question. There's no need to worry about that. I've taken care of it already. Just as he said, Ader had handled every single detail to ensure smooth sailing for both Justin and Belle. Fighting the drones and automatons just happened to be a mild hiccup. Why couldn't they have summoned stuff like monsters? We didn't even get a chance to level up. Right? They weren't even that strong. So true. As the two spoke among themselves, the kneeling dwarven leaders watched with confusion and very bruised pride. They all glanced at the head of science and technology, and the poor dwarf looked like he was about to cry. They could only imagine his pain. In any case, since you've all agreed to surrender, there's just one more thing we need from you. Justin stepped forward, clearing his throat as he stared at the crowd before him. Shall we get started? The final battlement stood tall, but everyone that remained on it knew this wouldn't be the case for long. This was especially true for Councilman Finn. He and his subordinates were outnumbered, outgunned, and overall outmatched. This was an overwhelming loss for them, and the fact that the entire fortress city had been surrounded by the enemies meant the place would fall before long. Perhaps in a few hours, in the best case. If we lose the fortress city, we're all doomed. If the giants don't do us in first, then it would be the dragons. Either way, the dwarven civilization was on the brink of extinction. We surrender. A loud voice permeated the fortress city, including the battlefield and the battlement where the brave dwarves were standing on, ready to throw their lives away to stop the impossible enemies that were before them. What is that? Councilman Finn raised his head, his eyes widening as he witnessed the holographic display of the rest of the councilmen. All the members of the Senate were kneeling, their defeated features evident on the massive screen that was laid bare for everyone in the city to see. Heck, even the enemies could probably see the screen if they had a special skill, tool, or magic to aid them with it. Those fools. What are they doing? Finn muttered, his fists clenched as he watched them grovel before the enemy. Have they no shame? No pride? Why were they surrendering to an enemy who invaded their territory and caused so much chaos and destruction? Why would they? Does this mean we won't have to fight those things? Thank goodness. I really thought I would die. So I don't have to sacrifice myself? What a relief. The Senate made the right call. As Councilman Finn heard these murmurs from the soldiers around him, his widened eyes bulged even further. He turned to look at them, and he could see relieved expressions on their faces. He noticed how pale their faces had become, and the beads of sweat that enveloped their visage. All this time, he was only aware of his fear, but now, after seeing just how scared everyone was, he could understand. We would have all been slaughtered. While it pains me to surrender now, it seems this is the only alternative. It left a bad taste in his mouth, but I suppose we'll have to ignore all the fatalities we have. Hold on, fatalities. At this point, the councilman's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. He looked around him, and then turned to the devastated battlements. How am I just noticing this? No matter how hard his eyes scoured, he could not see a single corpse. None among the troops were even injured in the slightest. Yes, they had lost a lot of infrastructure, but no one had been hurt. Councilman Finn was not haughty enough to believe that this was due to his exceptional leadership and strategies. No. They intentionally caused no casualty. He looked ahead, watching the army that remained still, and gulped. The reason the dragons remained still, rather than using their powerful breath to destroy the battlements, the reason the undead army had halted its advance, and even now, the reason why the main army was keeping its distance. It's not because they're being cautious of us at all. They were being considerate. All this time, while the dwarves were fighting with everything they had, while fearing for their dear lives, the enemies never had the intention to kill them. From the very beginning, things would have turned out this way. He made a wry smile and loosened his clenched fist. He looked at the army of giants, at the grand knights, and at the one who sat on the throne. The man was smiling with pure satisfaction and amusement. Even then, Councilman Finn had to accept everything. His jaws loosened, and before he knew it, he was uttering words to the men around him. At ease, soldiers. We are surrendering. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. We'll move to Ray's story in the next chapter. I also apologize for the error chapters. That was irresponsible of me, and I truly hope it never happens again. That wasn't so hard now, was it? Ader sat comfortably in his chair, one of his hands supporting his head as he tilted it to the side and watched the entire dwarven army kneel atop their battlement. He also saw the holographic display of the Senate surrendering, which meant Justin and Belle had succeeded in their tasks, an exceptional feat that he planned to reward them for when the time was right. You should have just done this from the start and saved me all the trouble. Ader muttered, referring to the groveling dwarves. Though, I won't pretend that I'm not a bit sad that things have to end so quickly. Perhaps he overestimated them a little, but he was hoping for a bit of a desperate struggle at least, resistance from a select few dwarves who were too prideful to know their place. At least, that way he could justify killing some of them in this war. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. They're too sensible for their own good. Or maybe they are just so much in tune with every living creature's instinctive desire to live. Either way, the party was over. We won. As soon as Ader said this, the giants gave a deafening roar of victory. Looking at their faces, one could easily see boundless joy and pride in the faces of the giants as they began to march forward per Ader's command. They cheered and hailed Ader for his might, while also singing derogatory words about the dwarves. Some of the giants would naturally feel a little frustrated, since they didn't get to kill any dwarf, but all of those emotions were easily washed away by the taste of victory. Especially since they hadn't gotten that in over a century. Ader observed all of this, smiling to himself, as he indulged in even more thought. This is still only the beginning. Looking ahead at the third battlement as he neared it, he couldn't help but lick his lips. I've managed to get the giants and dwarves to subject themselves to me, and master by extension, but that is simply a prelude for what is to come. He still had other plans for this alliance. Freya followed my instructions, and the southern continent will indeed be utilized for her academy's excursion. It was perfect just as he wanted. Now that all the pieces are on the board, I have to prepare the perfect scenario pending the time that those little ones arrive here. Even if he didn't get much satisfaction from everything thus far, he knew the upcoming events would please him greatly. And not just me. Ader's eyes beamed as he imagined Ray's proud smile and the many pats he would get for all his hard work. I wonder how much Master will praise me when this is all over. The present. What the hell is going on in your head, Ader? Ray's thoughts screamed as he pushed himself forward as he and his friends glided in the air with their strong wings to escape the perils of war that continuously roared behind them. He looked around him and saw the frightened faces of his classmates, as well as the other students of the Imperial Academy. Heck, even the supervisors looked unnerved as they followed the Dragon Commander in front. Right now, the only thing keeping everyone calm is the thought of the shelter. Since spatial transport is down, they can't return us to the academy, so we're practically stuck here until things die down. Ray wasn't particularly frightened by any of this. In fact, he had a pretty good idea of what was happening, and he could practically sense all the warfare that everyone was running from in great detail. He was just getting a little tired of pretending to be nervous and worried, just like everyone else, though there was probably no need to. Everyone was too concerned about their own survival to care about what expression he was making. The only one who constantly glanced at him was Adrian. I'll just ignore him for now. Ray thought to himself, returning his thoughts to Ader and the kind of plan he had to be cooking up. Then, his mind branched to Luciale. How are things going on your end, Luciale? He sent a message through their link, expecting at least some sort of delay before she responded to him. However, much to his surprise, she replied almost instantly. I was just about to contact you, Ray. Things are crazy over here. Her thoughts seemed a little distorted as she spoke, and so noise similar to static in phone calls slowly hummed as her response reached him. This usually happened when a person was too distracted to fully focus on the link, or they were experiencing intense emotions that somehow affected the connection and transmission of thoughts through the secure channel. Strong emotions like fear and anxiety were pretty big offenders in this regard. Are you okay? Ray asked, feeling a little worried about her due to the growing static in their connection. There were very few things that could harm the current Luciale, but that didn't mean they didn't exist. Plus, since she was surrounded by allies, he wasn't expecting much harm to come to her. Now, though, he wasn't so sure. I can still use my spatial manipulation, so if push comes to shove, I can go rescue her. I don't know how the spatial issue is on her end, but if it's bad, then she won't be able to escape if things go south. Ray was tempted to not worry so much, since Ader was in charge of the plan. In fact, by all logic, there was no need for him to be so concerned. But, he still found himself worried. At least, until the system forced his emotions to settle. Me? Well, I'm fine, but everyone else isn't. He instantly asked Lucielle to elaborate on what she meant, which she did almost immediately. All the dragons that were supposed to be waiting for us here have been turned into undead. Right now, the staff are doing everything they can to protect us at least, until we have a window to retreat, but things are looking pretty bad. Ray's eyes flickered a little upon hearing that. At least we have a shelter we're heading to, but it seems there's no such thing for them. Just how much damage? So many students and staff are already dead, Ray. They're dropping like flies at this rate, but it looks like we'll soon be able to destroy the nearby undead and find refuge somewhere. A sigh of relief left Ray's lips as soon as he heard that. Be careful, okay? You're not in danger or anything like that, right? He managed to respond, multiple things going through his thoughts at once. Are you kidding me? I'm feeling very ecstatic right now, Ray. Yeah. He wasn't expecting the response he received, but everything slowly began to make sense once he heard Lucille's retort. So many dragons are dying around me, Ray. It's so fun to see. I think I'm getting overexcited, even. It's hard to maintain my facade when such an amusing sight is playing out in front of me. I see. He replied, a little half-heartedly. Now he understood why there was a bit of static in their communication. Lucielle was indeed feeling a very strong emotion, but he had been wrong about what it was. It wasn't fear or anxiety. It was joy. You're overjoyed about their extermination, huh? They're the enemies, Ray. I actually want to get in on the action, but that would blow our cover. Sadly, I can do nothing but watch these vile creatures die. Yeah. Ray nodded slowly, glancing at the scared and powerless dragons that were around him. He had to wonder why he didn't feel the same as Lucielle. Many moments later. Ray found a nice little corner for himself in the shelter that was promised to the students. It was nothing but a massive underground cave that resembled a secret bunker. It had so much space, though, so it was able to occupy all the students. At the current moment, everyone was waiting for the meals that were promised to them, since they were hungry, but all of them were just grateful to be alive. One look at the frightened and despairing dragons told Ray all he needed to know. I already know we're going to be eating slop, so that's not something anyone here should be looking forward to. He thought to himself with a wry smile. Even his dragon friends were on their own, in no mood to talk at all. This was perfect for Ray, though. Well, almost perfect. Hey, Ray. Adrian's voice echoed beside him, causing the latter to hold a sigh as he looked in the former's direction. Mind if I sit next to you? I don't mind. Just like that, Adrian sat right next to Ray, and his solitude was completely ruined. I have a question, Ray. He remained quiet and gave a light shrug, signaling Adrian to ask away. He already knew what the question would be, after all. All of this, was it your plan all along? Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Once again, apologies for the error chapters. What do you think Ader's endgame is BTW? All of this, was it your plan all along? As Ray heard the question, he maintained his stoic expression, barely reacting to what he just heard. After a second or two, he shrugged. That was not a yes or no, just as he wanted it. I see. Adrian mumbled, resorting to silence afterwards. This lasted for a minute or so, with no one speaking to each other or even glancing in any of the other's direction. This time, though. What do you think about all of this? Ray broke the silence. What do you mean? Adrian responded with an understandably confused tone. I mean the current circumstances, how the dragons are now in the opposite situation as they're normally used to. They're the prey, not the predator. In his head, Ray was somewhat hoping this experience could show some of the dragons how their actions caused the people of other races to feel. He knew it was a tad too optimistic, but he couldn't help but think in that direction. This made him all the more curious about what Adrian was thinking about it. We sometimes have similar though. I don't really feel anything, to be honest. His response was curt, and completely lacked emotion. It felt like he couldn't be bothered to feel anything else. Other dragons are sure to feel emotions like concern and pain if they were to see this. Their enemies, like the humans of this world, would shout for joy if they could witness this. But me? I feel nothing. Adrian neither saw the dragons as a friend or enemy. They don't matter to me. They're just a means to an end, after all. As soon as he heard that, Ray instantly understood his error, as well as the way it had affected how he interacted with the dragons. It seems I'm the only human who feels some measure of sympathy for them. Glancing around him another time, he caught the sight of many dragons crying, and many more simply huddled in fear. A few put on brave fronts, particularly the seniors, but Ray could tell they were scared. I never saw them as a means to an end, to begin with. They were initially the enemy, but, now I'm not so sure. After meeting the elves, particularly the Oracle, he understood that people weren't usually what they appeared to be. If there was a chance for the elves, and even the Oracle herself, then perhaps there could be for some, not all, but some of the dragons. Is that really the right way to look at things, though? He was sent to this world to defeat the dragons. No, it was to save this world. If I can save it without exterminating the dragons, shouldn't I pursue it? Or, am I being too optimistic? He sighed to himself. Ray didn't know enough to make a proper decision at the moment, and it wasn't smart to rush into conclusions. As such, it's better I postpone this decision till later. Right now, there's a more pressing matter. He glanced at Adrian and smiled at the boy. Why are you? Tempera. As soon as Ray activated this, everyone including Adrian, who was about to finish his question, completely froze in time. The population of everyone in the shelter were stuck in time, all thanks to Ray's skill. Now then. Mass doppelganger. Ray instantly created a clone of himself to replace him in his current position before teleporting out of the shelter in a flash. Tempera only worked when he was very close to his targets, so as soon as he moved a sufficient distance from the shelter, time returned to normal. As for his doppelganger, it couldn't do or say anything unless Ray gave it an instruction. And, of course, Ray already had that covered. Smiling at me. As soon as Adrian completed his question, his eyebrows raised with slight confusion, the clone responded with swift fervor. I need to sleep now. Don't disturb me. As soon as he said this, a dome of earth surrounded him, and the doppelganger was safe from any further scrutiny. No one else in this shelter paid much mind to this happening either. They all had their problems to deal with. With his escape fully settled, Ray left the claimed lands of the dragons in the battlefield and discreetly advanced to the camp of the enemies. He could see the wounded dragons retreating to the shelter, since the battle for the day was already concluded, but ignored them. Guess I'll have to conclude my task quickly and return before any real fuss is made. With that in mind, Ray raced through the air and went straight for the enemy camp. Well. Ray had observed the battle camp of the giant and dwarf alliance from high in the sky, but it was only until he got closer that he could fully appreciate how well it was constructed. Sentinels such as drones and automatons perpetually surrounded the camp, providing both air and land power. The tall walls that defended the camp had several enchantments on it, including anti-projectile ones, which pretty much rendered the usual dragon breath useless against it, among other things. Then, there was an invisible barrier, resembling a dome, that covered the camp like a blanket. Ray was able to easily bypass all of these things, though, and it wasn't difficult to spot the central building where he expected the leader of the forces to stay. There was one thing that surprised him a little, though. Isn't this an elaborate welcome? 4 Grand Knights were kneeling right in front of the central building, alongside several other giants who seemed to be expecting him already. It almost looked like a welcome party for him. I guess there's no point sneaking in. Ray smiled to himself, undoing his cloaking spell and skill as he descended from his heights. The moment his feet touched the ground, he was welcomed with the thunderous voices of the humongous people before him. Welcome, Lord Ray. Your servants are here to pledge our complete allegiance and lead you to the chief. The chief? Ader, huh? Ray grinned, nodding slowly as he began to advance towards the central building. It was all so amusing for him, but he did well to hold any snickers or chuckles he had on. He had been treated like royalty in many places, but this was the first time giants were doing it, and the irony of their subservience wasn't lost to him. I wonder if Belle and Justin are around as well. As tempted as he was to ask the giants, he decided to wait and ask Ader instead. It didn't take long for them to escort him to the massive tent in the form of a building that served as the chief's dwelling place. Once he crossed the layers of fabric that served as the door, he was greeted with sweet-smelling fragrance that betrayed the stench of battle that filled the world outside it. Everything in the tent was perfectly arranged, and it was completely neat, not even a speck to be found on the floor or in even the most remote location. That wasn't the best surprise of all, though. Bowing his head right in front of Ray, just a few meters ahead, was Ader. Master, it is with great joy that I welcome you here. The familiar seemed to be gushing with joy, but he did his best to maintain perfect composure as he bowed himself even further. Ader. It's been a while. Ray beamed. Raise your head. The man obeyed instantly, revealing the extremely wide grin plastered on his face. It's good to see you after so long, Master. Ader returned Ray's beam with twice as much energy as he slowly closed the distance. It's only been like 2 to 3 weeks, though. At that moment, Ray realized that he and Ader had never really had their own joint adventures or missions. He was always relegating other tasks to the familiar, while he would engage in his own task with someone else. Hasn't he brought this up before? I just keep forgetting. He smiled, looking at Ader's innocently overjoyed face. Indeed. Shall we sit? We have a lot to discuss, don't we? Ray wanted to compliment him on a lot of things, including the ambience of the tent that housed the two of them, but settling down was top priority. Of course, Master. Right this way. Ader led Ray to a reception where a soft sofa, along with a luxurious desk, as well as a prestigious meal, were waiting for him. Is that human food? It's been so long. Ray was already salivating as soon as he saw the food and drinks that he was presented with. Ader, you're amazing. Ray sat on the plush sofa and, after making sure he was comfortable, began to enjoy the meal that his familiar had so graciously prepared for him. All of it made him forget his experience in the Dragon Continent, as well as the pathetic shelter he would be forced to stay in to maintain his cover. This was the stuff. Now then, Master. I shall begin my report. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. As always, Ader remains the GOAT. With this, I have completely replaced all the error chapters. Wio. I see. Ray's fingers were stroking his chin as his full mouth was chewing on the last of Ader's delicious meal served on a literal silver platter. He had just finished listening to Ader's detailed report regarding the control of the dwarves and giants in the southern continent. The whole process seemed like overkill to Ray, but he couldn't help but see the brilliance in the plan. He was able to finish his task quicker than I expected as a result of that too. As Ray swallowed his food, washing down its contents with his drink, he couldn't help but marvel at Ader's genius. He used his superior strength to forcefully seize control of the giants, and then dangled immortality before them to keep them all loyal to him. As for the dwarves, he waged war to break their spirits by showing the gap between their might, and then offered them resources and help with their current crisis. In essence, a more advanced method of the carrot and stick. It seems the dwarves were more problematic, but they weren't a problem for him at all. Plus, from what he tells me, they'll especially be useful to me. Ray smiled, concluding his meal in totality. Since the dwarven nation had been facing scarcity for some time now, they were trying to generate a renewable energy source. It's in our best interests if they succeed, since we'll reap the benefits. I was right to tell Ader not to be too rough on them. Sure, there would be a few among the camp of the dwarves who resisted the alliance, unlike with the giants, who were completely loyal to Ader, but after seeing what Ray could do for them, their minds were sure to change. Even Ader shared the same sentiment. Looks like things in the south is going way better than I imagined, which leaves the real mystery here. Ray parted his lips to speak, but before he could get a word out, Ader smiled and addressed the thought he had. You desire to know what's on my mind regarding this whole war, and how it relates with the students in this excursion, don't you? So you did have something to do with it? I knew it wasn't merely a coincidence we came here. Ader smiled and nodded slowly. We have to make use of every opportunity that we can, don't you agree, Master? Ray nodded, but he was still puzzled in many regards. How did you even manage to, no, hold on, what exactly do you plan to do with this? You called it an opportunity, right? Ader's smile broadened, and he proceeded to sit in the air. I plan to kill as many dragons in this expedition, while dealing a heavy blow on the Dragon Empire as a whole. Ray already expected something along those lines, but he already knew things couldn't be so straightforward. He wanted more details. How heavy would this blow be? He asked the smiling Ader, who gladly went on with his explanation. The Imperial Academy houses the future of the Dragon Empire. By killing off all these young talents before they have a chance to sprout, we'll be severely wounding the Dragon Empire. I see. The casualty will deal a heavy blow to the educational system too. By eliminating the supervisors, who are basically the competent instructors of the academy, we'll be getting rid of powerful and skilled educators. All in all, this will help whittle down the potential enemies of humanity, which should make your mission of saving the world much easier. Ray couldn't help but remain silent for a few seconds as he brooded on Ader's little surprise for him. It's brilliant. He managed to whisper. Despite how cruel it was, there was no objective reason to be against it. Perhaps if he had maintained an attitude like Adrian's or Lucille's, he wouldn't have been so taken aback by the malevolence of the plan, but he just had to view them as living entities with souls like him. Thank you for your praise, Master. It's not praise. It's just, objectively speaking, your plan is brilliant. You've done a good job here, exceeding my expectations in every way. Yes, Ray felt conflicted about everything, but he couldn't deny that it was the best step to take. I can't compromise the plan, or the safety of the Alliance, for the dragons. According to the Oracle, the dragons are responsible for the destruction of the world, so this should be a way to somewhat reduce that possibility, even if it's only a little. Ray realized this was just a way for him to rationalize the deaths of so many dragons, both the past and future casualties, but he had to make some sort of excuse in his head. It's all for the greater good. He added with a small smile. Indeed. Ada responded with an enthusiastic nod. You have to save this world somehow. Perhaps the familiar had noticed Ray's discomfort with the plan, and was also trying to boost his morale by feeding into the rationalization. It didn't seem like that was what Ada was doing, but Ray couldn't help thinking that way. In order to distract himself from those thoughts, though, he swiftly changed topics. How are Belle and Justin? I haven't seen them since I arrived, and I don't sense them around. Ada shrugged slightly as he responded. They're helping me handle things in the other location of the excursion, where Luciel and Adonis are. Ray nodded in understanding. He had already told Ada about Adonis' presence in the academy, so this wasn't a surprise to either of them. And how about Adrian? How are things going with him? This time, it was Ray's turn to shrug. I have things handled. In fact, we've been speaking in detail about the plan to infiltrate the capital, and he has a good plan for it. Ray went ahead to tell Ada about Adrian's idea to use the Storm Dragon Lord's connections to get into the capital. It would be easy to do if Adrian recommended Ray and Luciel, since the Storm Dragon Lord would even be paying attention to the interclass exchange. Of course, this would mean Ray had to inform Adrian about Luciel's presence in the academy, but something told him that he already knew. I guess there's no use hiding it, then. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. What do you all think about this whole arrangement? Luciel already knows Adrian is here, since it's quite difficult to miss him, and she knows he is on our side. I guess it's only proper Adrian knows she is here as well. No. Ada interrupted Ray's thoughts with a rather stern response. No, to what? I shouldn't tell him about Luciel. Ray's brows were raised a little as he looked at Ada's bothered face. The way he remembered it, Ada was the one who kept nudging him to trust Adrian more and more. Why did he suddenly have a problem with that trust? No, I am not particularly concerned about whether or not you inform him about Luciel. That matter is largely inconsequential. The way Ada spoke so dismissively about Luciel made Ray a little annoyed, but he ignored those feelings. He was more concerned with where he was going with the point. What I was referring to was the rest. Adrian's plan regarding the Storm Dragon Lord. I believe it is wiser to stick with the White Dragon Lord. Really? Even after everything I told you about her current position in the Empire? I am well aware of all that, but I also know what I am talking about here. There's no better horse to bet on than the underdog. Ada smiled slowly. Didn't know you were big on betting. Only when the end results are guaranteed, but then you wouldn't really call that betting, would you? The smugness by which Ada spoke betrayed the respectful nature he was trying to imbibe whenever he addressed Ray. How are you so certain of the end results, though? That is largely unnecessary information, but I'll tell you why the White Dragon Lord is a far better option. One is that, whether or not Adrian cooperates with you and introduces you to the Storm Dragon Lord so you'd get access to him, the White Dragon Lord's camp is easier to get into. Also, even though you have a cooperative relationship with Adrian, I wouldn't advise you to put yourself in a situation where he has more control than you do. If you get into the camp of the Storm Dragon via Adrian's recommendation, the pendulum of control rests majorly with him. Ray understood all of this, which was why he hadn't been totally sold on the Storm Dragon plan yet. But that didn't explain why the White Dragon Lord's choice was the superior option, especially concerning the plan. Whether or not her political power is dwindling or not, the White Dragon Lord remains a Dragon Lord, which means she has access to the capital. Plus, since her power is waning contributed considerably by the dwindling number of reliable subordinates she has, the chances are higher that she would be more appreciative of you as a disciple, than the Storm Dragon would. That's true. Ray muttered. Besides, there are a limited number of subordinates that can be brought to the capital by a dragon lord. The storm dragon is not lacking in even more capable subordinates, at least, in his own eyes, that he would rather take there than you, even if you are the most exceptional student in the academy. Once again, Ader was making complete sense in every word that he uttered. Compared to the Storm Dragon Lord, the White Dragon Lord should be more desperate, which means she has the more important positions open. If you really impress her, there's a chance you can be elevated faster than you ever would as a subordinate of the Storm Dragon Lord. True. Besides, the White Dragon Lord has expressed interest in having disciples from the base stages, right? That assurance isn't present with the Storm Dragon. Don't forget. Adrian distinguished himself in a literal war against the elves and fought the champion of humanity in order to get the Storm Dragon Lord's attention. Compared to that, winning an interclass exchange among a bunch of dragon newts in basic stages is really nothing. Ader added, causing Ray's eyes to widen slightly. He never really thought of things that way. The way Adrian spoke to him about the whole thing made it seem very feasible, but the more he gave it critical thought, the more the plan seemed to have a lot of holes. You should also consider the aftermath of what I'm about to do here, Master. I doubt the interclass exchange will be cancelled, even after everything, but it certainly won't be the same as it would have been if the excursion happened without incident. AAHH. Whether it will be for the better or worse, I can't say, but you should really stick to the constant among the variables. The White Dragon Lord has already given her word, and so it doesn't matter how things turn out. As long as you impress her, you're in. Dragons were creatures of pride, so the White Dragon Lord would have no choice but to make him her disciple. Besides, she was pretty desperate already. It really was the best option out of everything. Bottom line, it makes more sense for the head of an academy to employ students even if they are newts as disciples, than for a fully fledged dragon lord at the height of his power to do the same. Adrian isn't in the academy because he has anything to really prove to the Storm Dragon Lord there. He's just there to gain the recognition of the other dragons and integrate himself with the Empire as a whole. It's more a matter of prestige to accompany his special treatment, as well as to turn him into more dragon than human by offering him thorough education. Ader concluded, sighing heavily. So, yeah, you should go for the White Dragon Lord. With all of that said, Ader kept a steady gaze on Ray and asked him one simple question. What do you say, Master? Do you trust my counsel? The query would have sparked some uncomfortable feeling within Ray if it had been asked a few weeks ago when the loyalty of Ader was still unsettled in his mind, but things were totally different now. Without question. I trust you, Ader. And Ray planned to follow his counsel to the letter. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. What do you think about Ader's counsel? Pretty solid, I'd say. So, with all of that settled, what exactly is my role in all this? Ray asked, adjusting himself on his seat as he looked at Ader. He had been informed, in great detail, about Ader's strategy for crippling the Dragon Empire and advancing the overall salvation of H-Tray, but Ray was yet to understand where he fit into the puzzle. Is there something I'm supposed to do, or? There's no need for you to be bothered with such trivialities, Master. Ader responded with a light smile, bowing slightly. All you have to do is maintain your cover and continue acting like a student of the Imperial Academy. In essence, he was to sit back and enjoy the show. I see. Fair enough. Ray said with a brief sigh before bouncing back to his feet. You're leaving already, Master? Yeah. I don't want things to get too rowdy in the shelter before I return. If that happens, my clone could give me away, and I wouldn't want that. AHH. Ader nodded in understanding, though his expression still showed a hint of sadness at his master's departure. I understand, Master. Thank you, for the meal and everything else. He patted Ader's shoulder as he began walking towards the exit, a small smile on his face. I'm counting on you. I will do my best, master. The two interlocked gazes for a moment, which felt like an eternity, and they nodded at each other. A second later, Ray had vanished from his position and was already on his way to the shelter. Phew! I made it just in time. As Ray entered the shelter, everyone inside was frozen in time, thanks to reinitiating tempera. As he suspected, he spent too much time with Ader in the camp, which resulted in the remnant army of the Dragon Empire to already be streaming into the shelter. All the students were expected to gather together to welcome them, as well as hear out what they had to say, so if he had stayed about a minute longer, there was a good chance that his clone would have been discovered. Of course, Ray knew he had a way around things, even if that were to happen, but he didn't want to rely on it. As a result, he was more than relieved that he was free from all manner of scrutiny. Once he took the place of his doppelganger, he undid tempera and swiftly brought down the earthen dome that he used to surround his clone. The result? AAHH. I was just about to break down the dome since you weren't responding. Adrian retorted, staring at Ray with a slightly stunned expression. The latter merely smiled. Yeah. I know, since I saw you before replacing the clone. He couldn't tell that to Adrian, though, so he simply used the excuse that he gave him before. I was asleep. What's going on? Well, we're all supposed to gather together. As in, all students, for the surviving soldiers that just returned from the battlefield. Ray also knew about that, but he acted oblivious. I see. All right then, let's go. Adrian made a face that showed he felt Ray was acting strange. However, with no way to prove it or justify his suspicion or confusion, he had to just go with it. Okay. Let's do that. Moments later. This is crazy. Ray's eyes widened as he counted the number of dragons that stood before the students. Back when he was rushing to get to Ader, and then return to the shelter, he didn't bother counting them. But now that he had more time on his hands, he was able to. And their total number shocked him. Just this few survived. There were less than 5,000 dragons standing before them, and most of them were dragon soldiers. A few commanders were sprinkled among the group, and only one general was left. The general that they first encountered was nowhere to be seen. So he's already dead, huh? Ray thought to himself as he laid eyes on the female dragon general that stood before the students and the rest of her fellow officers. She was currently the highest-ranked dragon in the southern continent, which meant she was under a great deal of pressure. No one wanted to die, but not everyone could live. Even the rations in the shelter could hardly be enough for a few nights, talk less of a whole 10 days. At the moment, the dragons were all looking for a superior to latch onto or at least, blame. As the room ventured into silence, the general addressed everyone, vividly explaining the horrors of the battlefield and how the slaughter of her fellow generals and subordinates was. Merely hearing it was enough to drive many to tears, or to completely break down. This was hell. She did a good job in assuring everyone that things would be fine, though. Ray knew it was all bullshit, but he nodded anyway. The naive dragon nudes, who would do anything to reach for hope, accepted her words of encouragement with full gullibility. Even some of the supervisors did the same, leaving only a few of them logical enough to understand the hoax they were being sold. There was no hope left in the southern continent, and it was obvious. The best course of action would be to retreat, but that in itself was largely impossible. Without soldiers holding the fort, the enemies would gain ground and pursue the dragons who tried to escape. Based on their sheer number and firepower enough to decimate an entire army of dragons, it was clear who would win in that chase. Ultimately, they were all stuck at an impasse. Just as Ader wanted. That guy is such a wicked tactician. Ray smiled. He didn't even know what would happen next, but he already knew it had to be well accounted for by his familiar's plan. All he had to do was sit back and enjoy the show. Looking around him, watching the sad and desolate faces of his friends made that very difficult to do, though. Fuck. Am I going to die here? Moracho, the usual optimistic student, was now yelling in fear and anxiety as he spoke to the classmates that sat with him. Ray was among these people, along with Lou Ffa, Gorge, Cyndy, and the other students that were stuck in Group 1. A few of them were worried about Group 2, but most of them were more concerned with their own survival. They were still very young, with ambitions and lofty goals that they desired to reach. Just a day ago, they were drooling over the fun they would have in the southern continent, and the prospects that awaited them after the excursion, during the interclass exchange. But now they just wanted to live. They had all finished the slop that was their meal for the day, and while most of the students were still hungry, they didn't crave the disgusting mush that was left of the rations. This is bad luck, horrible bad luck. Gorge mumbled, itching his hair very violently, as his glasses kept dancing on his face. He was usually very logical, yet he had relegated his fate to luck. Cyndy was clinging to Ray, trying to get comfort from him. It was clear she had a huge crush on him, and now that she was scared for her life, she wanted some sort of assurance from him. Of course, since he was trying to blend in well with the students, Ray had to play along. He let her rest on him, and he even stroked her hair gently as she embraced him. It wasn't like he enjoyed it, or anything like that, but this was the role he had to play. It didn't matter that her lush chest was pressing on him, and her soft skin kept rubbing against his. No, this was for the mission. As more of the students aired out their frustrations, Lou Ffa finally snapped and pointed an angry finger at one student who sat a distance from everyone and was busy having a light nap. It's all his fault. His fault. The person Lou Ffa pointed at was none other than Adrian Chase. We've never had an incident like this in any of the previous excursions. Guess what we've also never had? That's right, a human student. As he uttered this, many of the students' eyes widened, even ones that weren't classmates with Lou Ffa. They all turned and glared at Adrian. If looks could kill, their hateful gaze would have caused him death a million times over. Ray noticed all of this and saw it as his cue to intervene. Don't start this, Lou Ffa, not now. What, Rai? Are you defending that piece of shit? Lou Ffa scoffed with disbelief as he looked at Ray with surprise. Come to think of it, I saw you two talking earlier today. Yeah. Are you his friend or something? All of Ray's classmates stared at him with both contempt and surprise, but none of that affected him at all. He already expected this much from them. Yeah. We're friends. As he said this, even Cyndy shifted away from him. You can't be serious. I am. But he's human. And? Don't forget who his sponsor is. If you all treat him well, it's possible to gain access to the Dragon Lord supporting him. AAHH. All of a sudden, the looks of disdain and scorn that were pressed on him turned into amazement. Do you understand now? I'm not foolish enough to let go of this opportunity. If I get on his good side, I can get on the good side of a Dragon Lord. It's too dangerous to antagonize him now. I see, that makes sense. Gorge muttered. I didn't see it that way. Lou Ffa mumbled. I always knew you were smart. Cyndy resumed her ogling. Ray smiled in relief as he managed to overturn the reactions of his classmates regarding his relationship with Adrian. But, all of this is simply assuming we leave here alive. Moracho just had to ruin everything with more pessimism. However, Ray also had a response for that. Have some faith in our supervisors and the Dragon military. We'll all be fine, I'm sure. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. We're not going to be fine. Lucielle could hear the surviving staff whispering amongst themselves as they had their little meeting away from the rest of the students. Unlike Ray's group that had a certain level of hyperactivity, the ambience in Lucille's forlorn group was that of dead silence, almost like a graveyard. Those who spoke did so in hushed whispers, almost like murmurs. It made things easier for the eavesdropping Grand Mage. One look around her clearly showed the current state of the students. They were absolutely terrified, even though all of them were currently safe in the shelter that had been created by the joint magic of their supervisors. As a result of this haven, one could say they were no longer in immediate danger. They had managed to get rid of all the surrounding undead, and then cleared the area of the poisonous miasma, but, even though there was no enemy in sight, the damage already done was catastrophic. For one, so many students and staff, the former especially, died during the skirmish with the undead dragons. While the staff did all they could to protect them from the clutches of the undead ones, it was virtually impossible to cover all the grounds. In the end, several students had lost their lives, and even those who didn't were severely injured. That wasn't all, too. The miasma poisoning is getting worse for those affected. Yeah. We might have to quarantine them at this rate. For the safety of others. Quarantine? Are you sure that would be enough? What are you suggesting, then? They're just kids. If they can fight it for a while, it's best to. I'm just saying, why prolong their suffering? They're just kids. The staff were arguing amongst themselves, and Lucielle found herself enjoying every single juicy detail that was leaking from their lips. Based on their supposedly discreet conversation, the staff were a little conflicted on the state of miasma poisoning experienced by mostly students and a few supervisors. The supervisors could hold out for longer, as well as control their mana enough to dull the symptoms, but even they couldn't halt the spread of miasma. As for the students, well, they were as good as dead. The Dragon Empire had long discovered medication for miasma poisoning, but they didn't think they would need it in the southern continent, so they never brought any supplies. None of them were also skilled enough to cure it with their sheer skill. If they make one wrong move, they could also be infected, and die. Lucielle smiled to herself, trying her best to hide the satisfaction on her face. The solution isn't to do anything to those students. They're our responsibility, so we have to do everything in our power to protect them. The most adamant supporter of the young ones was Instructor Karina. Her concern for her students was genuine, and even now she remained their stern advocate. Thankfully, she was strong enough to have a firm say. And how do we do that? By acting fast. She responded swiftly. We have to leave this place as fast as possible. It was already late evening, and many of the students as well as staff were exhausted beyond description. Leaving the shelter at this period would be unproductive at best and suicidal at worst. Their mobility would be compromised, and if they were to encounter any enemies during their journey, they wouldn't have nearly enough energy to fight. Of course, Karina knew this already. The best shot we have is to rendezvous with the first group. We haven't been able to reach them all day, so isn't it likely that they're also experiencing a great deal of difficulty as well? There's a chance their situation is even worse than ours, and perhaps they didn't fare as well. At first, Karina said nothing. For all we know, they might have been exterminated. We have to operate on the assumption that they're not. She finally retorted. There's strength in numbers. If both our groups are together, there's a higher chance of success. The fellow supervisors sighed and nodded. Karina might have been a commander, but she was the closest thing to a general among the other instructors. Rumors were that she was hiding her fourth horn, though those were only rumors. Just that. We leave first thing during the day. I'm sure we would all have replenished sufficient energy for the trip. If we hurry, we'll still be able to save the poisoned ones. All right. Understood. I get it. One after the other, the dragon supervisors all agreed to Karina's suggestion, practically making her the de facto leader of the excursion. The plan was simple: everyone would fly to the first group as soon as morning came, and then they would come up with something more elaborate once that first hurdle was passed and they had more information regarding the situation of the first group. Many things were hinging on the safety of the first group, but this was the best idea anyone had. I just hope we... Lucielle, are you listening to me? Forcefully drawn out of the conversation among the staff, Lucielle slowly opened her eyes and hid her gritting teeth as she turned to the source of the sound. It came from Mija, the class representative. Mija. She muttered, pretending as if she was just waking up from sleep. Her eyes flickered for a few seconds as she acted disoriented. It wasn't just Mija that was around her, but the rest of her friends and classmates from Imperial Academy Class 1A. They were all sticking together. How can you sleep in this kind of situation? I'm scared out of my mind. Me too. I'll have nightmares for sure. I can't even fall asleep. As they confided in Lucielle regarding their current problems, she felt like scoffing and rolling her eyes. She didn't appreciate that they were speaking to her at the moment, particularly because she was busy with something else. Still, since she had to keep up appearances, there was no way Lucia could treat her friends badly. Damn it, why didn't they just die during the struggle with all those undead? In the end, she made a smile and began to comfort those around her. As she did this, she noticed a certain gaze on her. It was from Ado and I. Why is he staring at me like that? I've been noticing it for some time now, but ever since the excursion started he's been paying unnecessary attention to me. In fact, his fixation on her predated the excursion. Even in class, she felt his attention fall on her on many occasions. At first, Lucielle was worried that her cover had been blown. She even confided in Ray about it, but he assured her that wasn't the case. Hence, she ignored it. But, the stalking had become excessive at this point. She had run out of excuses to give him now, especially since he was meant to be preoccupied with his own fears and anxiety, not her own well-being. That left only one possible explanation. Does he have a crush on me or something? She nearly retched the moment that thought flashed in her mind. Her recoil in disgust was properly covered up, though. None of her frightened friends even suspected a thing, and they continued with their hugs and words of affirmation. The shelter was a massive earthen dome that was fortified enough to hold, so there was probably really nothing to be too concerned about. Which is why this whole thing sucks. Lucielle sighed internally. She kept hoping something bad befell the group, but it seemed her fun was already over. I wish I could participate in this whole thing, but it's a shame that I have to maintain my cover. If things got too dangerous for her, though, she would probably have to fake her death and rendezvous with Ray or Ader, both of whom could be accessed by her if she so desired. I can't be careless because I have options, though. Ray and I have worked considerably hard to integrate ourselves with these people. It would be a waste to throw all that away, especially from my end. Plus, she wasn't done learning as much as she could from the dragons. Despite how sickening being among them it was, she endured every moment of it due to the benefits that came along with her sacrifices. They were very well worth it. Meanwhile, with the earthen dome that housed hundreds of dragons standing erect in the distance, two figures watched from afar with smiles on their faces. Justin and Belle. As their hairs swayed due to the night breeze, they observed the fortified walls of the dragon's haven with anticipation and amusement. I guess we should start preparing for what comes next, Belle said to Justin, before shifting her attention behind her, where there was an army of more undead waiting. They were stationary, yet they growled with a bloodlust that reeked of death. Justin nodded as he heard this and offered the only response that came to his mind. The only one could give. Yup. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Looks like there's gonna be more carnage. Also, apologies for the clone chapters. My exams aren't over, and things aren't going so well IRL. The next day. Ugh, this stuff is disgusting. Rations were passed among students, and most of them had nothing pleasant to say about the food. Somehow, it was even worse than the slop they had the previous day, a feat Ray didn't think was possible. Lou Ffa, Moracho, and the rest of Ray's classmates ate together with him and Adrian, even going as far as making conversation despite their vivid apprehension. Still, they all behaved. All thanks to that little conversation we had yesterday. Ray nearly smirked as he watched them try to do the dragon version of ass-kissing to Adrian. It seemed they also wanted a slice of the cake. I wonder how long they can stomach talking to a human. He wondered in amusement. Of course, he was more concerned with the overall complaints of the students regarding the quality and quantity of the meal they were just served. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. The food reserves of the camp were affected and overrun in battle, so the slop that the students were currently complaining about was the only thing left. In fact, most of the dragons in the military were probably going on empty stomachs just to make sure the students had something in their bellies. None of the students knew about this, of course. In any case, based on what I've seen here, I highly doubt we'll be staying for very long. The current arrangement was not sustainable in the slightest. None of the soldiers could afford to look after Ray and his classmates, not with a literal war on their hands. They also couldn't afford to keep feeding the mouths of students when they also need the nutrients for war. I have a skill that allows me to convert the mana in the air to nutrients, so I could probably go without food at this point, but I guess not everyone is privy to that. Ray thought to himself with a silent sigh. Whether this was a good or bad thing eluded him. It wasn't just Ray who was thinking like this, too. The supervisors and higher UPS among the military gathered together, and so Ray took it upon himself to just listen into their conversation. Lucielle told him all about her sneaky endeavors the previous night, so he figured it was his turn. This should be interesting. We can't contact anyone from the second group. At this rate, we'll have to assume they're in trouble as well. The head supervisor spoke in a slightly exhausted manner. He had been up all night, waiting, hoping for a signal from the other side. But there was nothing. He was also hungry, same as the other staff in the room. They had to minimize feeding as much as possible, so the staff joined the majority of the officers in their fasting. It couldn't be helped, after all. A culmination of these very strenuous factors resulted in an irritability within the head supervisor that he couldn't quite hide anymore. It was clear from his countenance alone that he was sorely upset. I already told you that the base your other group went to has fallen. It fell moments before they started attacking this place. It brings me no pleasure to say this, but that group is probably. Nothing is certain yet. He interrupted the dragon general, the only one of that rank in the room, and soon regretted it afterwards. I am sorry, please forgive my words. That doesn't matter right now. I do understand your plight, but we can't afford to be hopeful at the moment. If we do not take decisive actions based on our current reality, then things could go south real fast. It was obvious at this point. The giants and dwarves had already destroyed the dragon camp in that place, leaving no survivors. Since it was quite literally their territory, it was safer for the students and staff who got transported there to be presumed dead. No one could tell for sure, but this was the most reasonable position to take. As you can tell, having you here isn't sustainable in the long run, which is why. What? You want to kick us out of the shelter? We might be okay, but those are students. They wouldn't survive a minute out there. You can't just. Silence, Commander. Interrupt me one more time, and I will kill you on the spot. At this point, the general was done with her benevolence. Her scowl said it all. The head supervisor forgot his irritation for a moment and allowed himself to be subdued by fear. As I was saying, it's not safe for either the students or my officers if you people remain here. The best thing to do is for us to split up, but that doesn't mean it's an aimless division. Everyone's eyebrows were raised instantly. The shore. You should all flee to the shore, the closest one to this base. Once you get there, find a way to get as far away from this continent as possible. Once you reach a sufficient distance away from here, spatial and communication magic should resume their function, so you should be able to get assistance from the academy. I see. The head supervisor muttered. It really did seem like the best plan. The giants will not chase you past the water, and machines that work well for land combat generally do not perform the best in water, so even the machinations of the dwarves won't be much good once you reach the sea. Drones would also be shot down from the sky, since dragons were particularly skilled in aerial combat. We'll do our best to distract and hold off the enemies, so they won't know of your departure. And, even if they eventually find out, we'll ensure they won't be able to pursue you. Despite how cold the general seemed, her intentions were nothing short of protecting the innocent kids under her care. This mission was clearly going to be harder than she represented, particularly for the military, but she and her subordinates were prepared to undertake the task. For the future of the Dragon Empire. Interesting. Ray smiled as he heard the conversation in full. Just as he suspected, there was some other plan that involved leaving the shelter sooner rather than later. I wonder if Ader predicted this, or that it would happen this soon. He didn't want to overestimate or underestimate Ader, so he decided not to think too much about the issue. Instead, he focused on his link with Lucielle after making sure his friends wouldn't distract his conversation with her. They were too busy around Adrian anyway. Yo, Lucielle. How are things on your end? Not good. Based on the way she sounded, it was clear that a lot was going on in the shelter as they conversed. Naturally, this piqued his interest. The miasma poisoning situation has gotten more intense over here. Staff and students have it, and they're beginning to worry that it'll spread even further if they aren't quarantined or killed off. Hearing Lucille's side just made Ray realize just how better off his own group was. Is Group 1 getting special treatment because of me? Ader, you're strangely very considerate. He mused. In any case, a lot of the people here are very weak. Either due to hunger, or the poisoning. The staff are casting buff spells and all for us, but it's a temporary solution. At this point, they're betting everything on finding your group. That's funny, considering the fact that my group is planning on leaving this place to go to the shore. Ray responded, going into details by explaining what he overheard mere moments ago. In no time at all, Lucielle was brought up to speed with the whole thing. I see. Interesting. Is it, though? Yup. I really wonder what they'll do once they get to your camp, and meet no one there. It would probably be overrun by the giant and dwarven armies by then. Welp. I suppose it'll be a massacre, then. We have to fly to your group to get the proper treatment for a lot of us here, so imagine if we enter a camp overrun by the enemy. None of them would stand a chance at all. We're already gathering together. Preparations are nearly complete. We'll tear down the dome and immediately initiate FLIH. Suddenly, Ray felt Lucille's mood suddenly change. It felt like a slight break in transmission, but it wasn't. At least, not really. Lucille's emotions had spiked up again, but this time it wasn't due to purely emotional reasons. You okay? Looks like things are about to get busy here again. Hearing that made Ray smile a little. He could tell that Luciel wasn't worried, and he also wasn't, especially now that he had already spoken to Ader. "You have company, huh? How many?" For a while, Luciel didn't reply. It seemed she was taking her time to assess the threat. After nearly a minute, though, she finally spoke. "A lot of them. Looks like I was wrong, Ray." Another short moment of silence echoed within his mind before she completed her line of thought. "The massacre's already beginning. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Get pumped for what's to come, fellas. Senseless battle and deaths. I hope." Rumble. By the time they heard the noise, it was already too late. The group was already surrounded by the enemy, as well as a terrible bog of the same poison that was slowly killing a lot of the members. This is. Even though they were in the dome, none of the more perceptive dragons could deny everything they sensed or everything they could see. This is bad. The undead army of dragons approached, a terrifying sight against the darkening sky. Their skeletal wings flapped with an eerie, hollow sound, and their empty eye sockets glowed with a ghostly purple light. Each dragon's body was a twisted mass of bones, some still bearing tattered remnants of flesh and scales. The ground trembled as they moved, their massive, clawed feet crushing everything in their path. Dead trees snapped like twigs, and broken rubble broke apart as even and the earth cracked under their weight. From a distance, their bony figures looked like a nightmarish storm cloud, rolling forward with relentless purpose. At the forefront was the largest of the undead dragons, its skull crowned with broken horns. There were 4 in total. This was a dragon general, and it let out a bone-chilling roar, a sound that echoed like the howls of the damned. The other dragons answered with their own roars, creating an absurd melody of terror that filled the air. As they drew nearer, the stench of decay became overpowering. The wind carried the smell of death, a sickly sweet odor that turned the stomach. And then came the worst of it all, the miasma. The perverse energy rotted everything around them, and as they approached the base of Group 2, they brought that rot along with them. Needless to say, this was incredibly bad. No matter how one saw it, this place would be the graveyard for a lot of dragons, if not all of them. "We need to move now." Karina swiftly took charge once again, causing all her newfound subordinates to snap out of the state of pure shock that they were in. Most of them were paralyzed the moment they felt the emergence of the undead, who seemingly popped out of nowhere. "There's no time to..." Boom. Before she could complete her statement, the dome that shrouded both staff and students was bombarded by a myriad of powerful dragon breaths. The walls, enchanted or not, did not stand a chance. In one loud burst of loud explosion, several cracks and holes appeared all over the dome, causing the entire structure to begin caving in on itself. If they remained inside, they would be buried alive, but if they took a step out those walls, there was nothing but overwhelming foes waiting for them. It seemed both their actions and inactions were synonymous with suicide. But everyone pull it together. Once again, Karina took the situation by the reins and swiftly addressed everyone. "Since we are all ready for departure, we will begin our ascent from a hole that I'll tear up in the ceiling. But that's suicide. They're waiting for us out there. The darkened skies too, it's sheer miasma. We won't be able to fly with such dense clouds of the stuff." Karina heard all of this and gritted her teeth. She knew all of this to be true, but she was just trying to rationalize that option, considering the second one was worse in her head. "There's only one option left, then. We dig using magic and navigate our way through tunnels until we safely get out of here. There was only one problem about this whole thing. Time." The dome shattered apart, causing most of the debris to burst away from their positions, but a few were crashing down about to fall upon the innocent students and staff. Absolute departure. Karina let out a cry, using a wind spell to send all the broken rocks away from the helpless populace, practically saving the lives of everyone around her. One look from the frightened ones made it clear how dead they would be without her. Unfortunately, while it wasn't a direct consequence of Karina using her spell, the group was now in an incredibly vulnerable position. After all, their dome had finally been destroyed. Any second now, and the undead dragons would charge at them from their very short distance and try to rip them all to shreds. It would be a gruesome death for everyone indeed. I have to do something. This is the only way. Karina thought to herself, and her conflicted expression showed exactly how she felt about the whole thing. I'll begin to work on the tunnel. I'm the best elemental mage here, and I'm also the strongest. Saving the students is top priority, so I will be in charge of guiding them away from this place. Any complaints? No one could even say anything, even if they wanted to. I need you all to buy me more time, though. She looked at the staff around her, both the ones who had miasma poisoning, as well as the healthy ones. Most of them would not survive this, and the least she could do was be honest with them. Based on abilities, it would be best if she were to face the undead dragons, especially the leader, who was a general. The thing was way above the league of the others. Karina knew, but she refused to say anything. Doing that would only reduce the resolve of everyone who had made up their minds to die. I can't do that. Instead, she rallied up the students with her loudest voice and called them all to her. All students, follow the sound of my voice and gather in my location. The staff will surround us and provide us cover while I create a path of escape to you. Fortunately, the undead dragons did not have ears or mental faculties to understand their blatantly announced plan. Or did they? Boom! Volleys of dragon breaths were suddenly sent to the moving students, some of which broke past the defense rendered by the helping staff. In the end, for yet another tragic round. Arg! Several students shrieked as they met their ends. And this was only the start. As Karina was busy creating the tunnel with her magic, making it as large and suitable for escape as possible, more students and staff were dying. Their cries reached her ears, but she decided to shut them all off and focus on her task. That was the only way to save everyone. This is getting more intense than I thought. That was Lucille's thought as she looked upon the sight of people dying to her left and right. Some dragons tried flying away, but their wings would get blown off, or they would be exposed to too much miasma and fall back down, dead. Lucille was mostly a spectator to all of this, but even she couldn't ignore the intensity in the air. It didn't last for too long, though. Students, get in the tunnel. The moment they heard this, all the students rushed towards the source of their salvation without dawdling for even a second longer. It was unfortunate for students who were far away from the tunnel, since it would take them a lot of time before they could enter the hole, even if the hole was incredibly large, so to accommodate a lot of people. Let's go. Lucille and her friends rushed towards the tunnel. She could see Ado and I running very close to her, along with the rest of her classmates. The crushing, choking wind caused their hair to dance as they desperately moved their legs in order to be safe. Then, where's MJ? Lucille realized that one vital person among them was missing. One look back, and she could see her friend currently lost in the stampede, her leg fractured, and one of her wings destroyed. It was clear that she got caught in the crosshairs, and now that the next volley was about to come, it was all over for her. She would inevitably be among the many casualties in this cruel ambush. MJ would did. Vuish. In a spark of white and red mana, Lucille charged towards the wounded girl and reached her within a second. In another second, she held MJ, tightly buckling her in her grasp, and then thrust the both of them away from the incoming strikes. There was no time to hear anything from anyone, or to make conversation. Luciel simply carried the scared Mija, and the both of them successfully made their way into the hole in the ground. "Thank you, Lucia. Thank you so much." Mija thanked her profusely, but Luciel hardly paid any attention to her. Her eyes were wide open with shock as she held the dragon girl, wondering why in the world she saved her, despite wishing death upon her many times. Why? Why couldn't I just leave her to die? It's what I wanted, right? Despite asking this question, she already knew the answer. Back then when she saw Mija about to be killed, the image of a certain girl overlapped with the dragon girl. Luciel was nearly disgusted that she remembered her sister when looking at a dragon, but it was true. After that, her body simply moved on its own. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. There'll only be one today, though, due to exams and all. The survivors of Group 2 were less than 10% of their initial total number. This spoke volumes regarding just how many of them had been slaughtered by the effects of a war they hardly knew anything about. Fear clawed at their hearts as they navigated their way in the near pitch-black tunnels buried underground, their sights set on the only person who could help them now. Instructor Karina. She was the only staff left among the survivors, and she was also the sole reason any of them were alive at the moment. If they had chosen to flee by air, the enemies would have gunned them down. Right now, the only option available to them was to crawl through the tunnels made by Karina's magic like moles, desperate moles. It was humiliating, but none of the dragons were very concerned about that. They just wanted to survive. The screams and wailings of their classmates or colleagues kept ringing in the ears of the fortunate dragon students, and many of them shivered as they hurriedly trailed behind their dear instructor. What would happen next? Would they be safe? Just what fate awaited them outside the tunnels? The students had every right to be anxious about it all. There were barely 50 of them left, after all. Ha, ha. Luciel found herself breathing a little heavier than she expected as she had the wounded Mija behind her. Her face displayed a mix of emotions, all of which were obscured by the darkness that surrounded most of the students. What the hell am I doing? She should have left Mija to die, but ended up saving her. As if that wasn't enough, she was still catering for her as they made their way forward. There's no use, is there? Why am I doing all of this for her? She asked herself, not liking the answers that seemed to be the most obvious. In any case, this is really something. One good look around, and Luciel could barely see any of her classmates around. Other than Adonai and Mija, there really weren't any others left. They're all dead. The same could be said for the other classes, which made it clear why everyone's mood was so heavy in the darkness around them. No one said a thing, and they just obediently followed Karina's lead. Hence, absolute silence reigned. At least, until the instructor spoke with a stern tone. We'll be reaching the surface now. I'm nearly out of mana, and I believe you all need some rest too. No one could fault the instructor for saying this. Not only was she creating a tunnel wide enough for everyone to pass through using advanced earth magic, but she was also using wind magic to supply everyone with fresh air while regulating the temperature around. Finally, she was utilizing her sensory skills to look out for any incoming threats in order to protect the students. Everything was being done by her and her alone. All of this was not even counting the fact that she must have been worn out herself by the deaths of her colleagues and the students in her care. Despite experiencing all of this tragedy, she remained strong and performed her duties. An admirable trait. Luciel caught herself thinking along these lines before quickly rebuking herself for having such thoughts. She noticed Adonai looking at her strangely for a moment, which made her even more upset. I can't wait for all of this to be over. Crack. The earth shattered apart, causing debris to fly in multiple directions as a large circular hole formed on its surface. Emerging from this hole were the 50 or so students, all of them being led by their able instructor and supervisor. Their faces depicted relief at the sight of the bright afternoon sun, though the disheveled state they were in made it difficult to see. They had been walking in darkness for hours, hungry and exhausted, but it was finally time to rest. Karina observed all of this from the corner of her eyes and made a sad smile. Poor kids, no, I shouldn't think that way. In the eyes of this woman, they weren't merely weaklings that garnered her pity, but strong ones that deserved respect. Since she couldn't sense any of the enemies, and they were a long way from the place that they were attacked, she could only conclude that they had lost their attackers. Hopefully, we can make it to the giant war base before the day runs out. We'll have to fly for the rest of the journey, but I'm not sure if they're up for it. All the students were exhausted, so she wasn't sure if they could handle flying. Even if they did manage to make it to the sky, how long would they be able to maintain flight? She didn't know, couldn't know. Still, we're way behind schedule as it is. We have to move forward, or else. As she was having these thoughts, she witnessed many of the students collapse to the ground in sheer exhaustion. Oh, on the second thought, perhaps finding something for them to eat comes first. Before she could make up her mind, though. So this is where you all were. A voice came down to them from the sky above. What? Boom. The sudden descent of the source of those words caused the air itself to tremble, and the ground shattered apart as a result. In an instant, even the drowsy dragons were wide awake, and they all fled away from the area of impact. They all regrouped, looking as frightened as they could as the smoke began to clear and two silhouettes appeared from the crater. We would have had some trouble if it wasn't for your magic, Belle. The male voice echoed out loud, sending even more shivers down the spine of everyone. As the duo appeared from the smoke, two young humans made themselves known to the cowering dragons. Well, what can I say? The female referred to as Belle said with a wide smile. I'm just that good. As the two made their stance against the group of dragons, they showed no worry, fear, or regard in the slightest. The only thing present on their faces was amusement. Asterisk. 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 A/N. We start a new month tomorrow, and I'll do my best to mass release. I also plan to be a lot more consistent now that my exams are over. I hope you enjoyed the chapter, and I will do my best to improve the quality as much as I can. Those two, they're humans. Karina had a look of surprise on her face as she laid eyes on the boy and girl that now made themselves known to the whole group. The ambience they gave off resembled that of humans, but there was something sinister about them. She couldn't quite put her fingers on it, but it was obvious that they were different from the kind that she knew about. Plus, when were humans this strong? She thought to herself, a bead of sweat dripping from her face as she interchanged glances between the two. Karina had a sensory skill that also functioned as a gauge of abilities when confronting adversaries. She could always tell how strong or dangerous a person or location was just by focusing in their direction and expending mana. That was why she was able to tell that these two were not to be trifled with. They're strong. A small glance at the rest of the students, and she could see a host of them underestimating the humans. I can't fault them for their disposition, but it will do us no good. These two are at the level of dragon commanders, at the very least. No one here but me stands a chance. If any of the students butted in, it would be the end of them. So, I guess it's up to me to somehow find a way to defeat the two of them. But how? My mana levels are quite low, and I'm also very exhausted. She was at a major disadvantage, and the more she thought of it, the more she realized this had to be a part of their plan. They must have waited till we exhausted our strength so they could ambush us at our most vulnerable. As expected of crafty humans. Regardless, Karina was not going to give up in any way. She had a trump card up her sleeves, an exclusive skill that made her as strong as a dragon general, if not a little more. Right now, there's no other choice. As she glared at her opponents, they smiled at her with patient eyes. It almost felt like mockery, but she didn't care. She just had to win. Class elevation. Vuyuyuyum. The instant she activated the skill, a burst of energy roared from her body, shrouding every aspect of herself in crimson power. Her tiny frame grew more flesh, and she grew at least a few inches taller, with her hair dancing high in the sky. Then, emerging from her forehead was a fourth horn, one that grew longer than the rest. The whites of her eyes became black, and her crimson eyes shone with blinding light. She wasn't done, though. Full transformation. Her body began to experience rapid growth at that point, with her humanoid aspects being replaced with scales, while increasing in mass. Before long, she was on all fours, her long tail now fatter than ever, dancing in the air. Her wings shot up, while her terribly long horns peaked upward, while slanting a little to the side in a majestic function. Her body was still covered in red-hot energy which distorted the space around her. Fortunately, she had already signaled the students to stay back when she glanced at them not too long ago, so none of them were being affected by the sheer pressure around her. Now that she was in her dragon form, with the class elevation skill active, she was at least 4 times stronger than normal. The dragon form was the natural state for everyone in the empire. Dragons were naturally born that way, and it was their natural state. However, by way of adaptation, and also for utility's sake, they took on a more humanoid form as they grew older. This was for a few important reasons. The most important one was that by taking on a humanoid form, a dragon's power went into a state of high compression. They were weaker in this form as a result of that, but the important thing was that after compressing their power for very long, transforming back into their dragon form made them much stronger than they would have normally been. As a result of their power being compressed like a lid being placed over a boiler with high pressure, their overall abilities were building up at a dangerously massive rate. Once this was recognized by dragons, they made it a policy to remain in humanoid states unless absolutely necessary. Since this was a way to passively build up power, there were hardly any complaints. Why was all of this relevant now? Well, Karina was currently a dragon general thanks to her class elevation, which greatly boosted her power in humanoid form. By reverting to her dragon form, this power would only skyrocket even more. Right now, I'm confident. Status window. Name, Karina. Race, dragon, storm species. Class, general, A tier. Level, 200. 19.5% EXP. Life force, 3,000/3,100, plus 1,550. Mana level, 2,900/4,500, plus 2,250. Combat ability, 3,450/5,000, plus 2,500. Stat points, 0. Skills, exclusive class elevation. Skills, non-exclusive absolute elemental magic. Dragon breath, lightning. Grand mana recovery. Grand sensory perception. Grand draconic flight. Grand regeneration. Grand draconic resistance. Grand draconic power. Alignment, lawful evil. Additional information. One of the most talented dragon commander, who chose the path of education due to her passion for young dragons and their growth. She is currently a general. End of information. I can take them down. Karina's thoughts echoed loudly within her as she glared at her opponents and clenched her sharp teeth. She was not at full power, due to the many deficiencies that her body currently suffered, but she was still certain that her current state was stronger than her adversaries. Now then, let's end things quickly and Can I take care of this, Belle? You helped track them down, so I have to contribute to something. The voice of the boy interrupted her thoughts, his tone a lot more casual than she was expecting. What in the world was happening here? Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. I plan on doing a mass release of 5 chapters per day for an indefinite number of days. With your support, I'll keep going, so please, support. I appreciate it greatly. It was absurd. Why should I let you face her? You'll get all the EXP for that. Please. Come on, Ader will kill me if I didn't contribute substantially to the mission. Very absurd. The two humans were bickering like little children while an overwhelmingly powerful enemy was right in front of them. They showed no regard at all, not to mention fear. Okay, how about we play a game of rock, paper, scissors? That way, we'll be able to decide who takes her on. The boy told the girl, Belle, after trying and failing to convince her on fighting the dragon general by himself. Was he mad? That was the question Karina had in her head as she looked at the current exchange between the two. No, it wasn't just him who seemed to be crazy. His partner also seemed to have a screw loose in her head, since she accepted the challenge with enthusiasm. The most tactical option would be for the two of them to attack at once. Why would they operate in such a manner? It makes no sense. Were they overestimating their abilities just because they were a tad stronger than regular humans? At most, they were at the level of humanoid dragon commanders, so how exactly would they hold their own against her, a dragon general? In fact, even if the two of them were to attack her in this state, they would lose badly. Does their confidence come from insanity, or ignorance? Karina thought to herself before deciding that the answer did not matter. The humans before her were not worth her consideration. Let's start with a proper dragon breath. Lifting her maw wide open, Karina channeled a great deal of mana through her throat and concentrated the energy so it would have a more devastating effect than normal, all within a time frame less than a second. Dragon breath remained the quickest and most efficient way to kill or destroy for a dragon, so a fully powered blast was bound to do a lot of damage. Since she belonged to the storm species, her breath was that of lightning. The result? Boom! Crimson crackles of electricity burst from her jaws, creating a vibrating effect as the ray of energy charged towards the two who were busy with the strange game that they were playing with their fingers. Karina had initially planned on the breath being a preface to the actual battle, since there was a good chance they wouldn't die from the blast. Even if they were weaker than her, there were still ways to protect oneself from a breath, or evade it. She wasn't sure of their skills, so she didn't want to make assumptions regarding their reaction to the blast. However, due to their distracted state, she couldn't help but draw her conclusions. At this rate, they're going to die. Boom! A barrier suddenly appeared right as the blast of crimson lightning was about to crash upon the two, completely protecting them from being fried to ashes. What? Karina's eyes widened as she looked at the surprising sight. They effortlessly blocked it? How? She could have sworn that they weren't really paying much mind to the dragon breath, so just how did they have enough time and energy to block it entirely? Are they far stronger than I thought? Did I underestimate them? Looks like the anti-projectile item that Ader gave me still works perfectly. You'd have been screwed otherwise, Justin. The human girl, Belle, said with a slight scoff as she looked at the boy. Once she said this, Karina realized what had happened. So they had an item, huh? I see, that makes sense. I wonder how humans can have access to such a powerful item, but I suppose I shouldn't use the standard metric for these humans. They're far stronger than the regular kind. Besides, since they were still in the dwarven territory, it was possible that these people got the technology from the dwarves. Perhaps this Ader person they referred to was a dwarf who also served as their superior. She couldn't be sure about all the details, though. There's no need to worry about it too, she told herself. So what if they have such an item? There were only so many times such an effect could function before the enchanted item gave out. Besides, it wasn't like she didn't have other skills at her disposal. Since she was in a hurry, Karina figured she'd just end things with another ability. But, before then. Yai! I won! Justin made a fist bump into the air as he yelled with enthusiasm, grinning like an idiot. TCH, you only won because you're physically faster than I am. Someone sounds like a sore loser. I'm not. R2. Don't be such a baby. Look who's talking. The more they spoke, the further the confusion within Karina began to spread. She glanced at her students, wondering if standing around and waiting was the best use of their time. Perhaps they can go ahead of me and start retreating. I'll join them after I take care of. Don't even think about it. The voice of the boy echoed into the air suddenly, causing a chill to fill the air the moment he spoke. All of a sudden, the ambience surrounding him changed, and his goofy expression vanished along with any semblance of lightheartedness. The air felt heavy, and his hard stare at Karina contributed to that feeling of dread. If anyone takes as much as a step away in retreat, they will be cut down immediately, he muttered, drawing out a thin blade. Remember that. Somehow, it felt like he meant every word he said. It also felt like he could make good on his word if he was pushed to it. That made his declaration all the more scary. But big words, for a dead man. Karina spoke with a thunderous tone, taking a step forward, her intimidating aura rising. For a few seconds after she said this, Justin chuckled. Dead man, huh? He responded amusedly. A thin, cold smile spread all over his face as he looked at the dragon before him. You're not wrong. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Next chapter should conclude the confrontation, hopefully. Some should be curious about Justin's new abilities. According to what Ader told him, there were 9 different applications of the hollow technique within the chaos art. The higher the number, the more powerful the application was. Hollow technique number 2 was Shadow Slave and hollow technique number 6 was Compound Corpse, both of which were techniques that Ader had used in the past. As for the one that was used on Justin, it was hollow technique number 7. False endless dot. This guy. Karina closely observed Justin as he brought out a thin blade seemingly from out of nowhere. His whole vibe has changed. The glow in his eyes had a mix of blue and red, creating a kind of purple glint within them. His hair was dancing with the slightly growing updraft, and his threatening presence was slowly climbing as he began to advance towards Karina. Based on what the bell girl said, she's the one with the anti-projectile item, which means dragon breath will work on him. Using it now would be too predictable, but she didn't see how his approach indicated any form of caution in the slightest. He was open in multiple areas, and while she was yet to see his full speed, she doubted he would have enough time to react and avoid her blast if he kept approaching her in such a careless manner. There's only one way to find out. With her priority being to protect the students, and also conserve as much energy as possible, she opted for the most minimalist option at her disposal. Dragon breath, lightning dot. The result. Boom. In an instant, Karina's powerful breath razed everything in its path, including the approaching human. He was utterly eviscerated. She used this chance to direct the remnant blast at the human girl, but once again, her anti-projectile item completely shielded her from the threat. TCH. Looks like it's still no good. Still, though. Karina took a good look at where Justin previously stood and gave a big smirk. Looks like I got one. A part of her had feared that he had some kind of trick up his sleeves, which was what made her hold back her big guns, but it seemed he was just an idiot who overestimated his abilities. Now that she thought about it, the girl was probably also the same. Strange, though. Karina looked at Belle with a slightly confused expression. Even after her partner was completely destroyed, she remained perfectly calm, almost as if she expected this to happen. Why would she be? That was very painful. A voice appeared from the very area that Justin would have been if he wasn't already blown to bits and fried till he turned to ash. What? Karina returned her attention to that exact position and she found the boy standing right there, completely naked, though shrouded in what appeared to be flashes of black and purple. His body seemed perfectly fine, albeit a little pale, and not too long after, the black energy around him formed clothing that clung tightly to his body. He had a pitch black top, accompanied by raven black trousers and a long cloak that flapped with the wind. Small black veins appeared around his eyes, as well as on his neck, almost as if some kind of dark liquid was flowing through his body. The whites of his eyes turned dark, before returning to normal. The dark veins also vanished, and before long, he had returned to his regular state. As expected, I shouldn't have turned off my pain nullification. What is he babbling about? Why isn't he dead? Karina thought to herself, already generating another blast as she watched him try to get close. He's supposed to be dead. I saw it with my own eyes. Perhaps she missed something. Perhaps there was a spell or skill he activated right before the blast hit him. Karina saw no such thing the last time, but perhaps she could now. This time for sure. Don't bother. There's no use in. Boom. The air shivered as the thunderous blast of lightning charged towards Justin, who was too busy drawing out his blade to consider evading the attack. This time for sure. I'll see everything. Karina kept her eyes peeled as she watched Justin get rammed with the explosive power of her dragon breath. However, unlike last time. What in the world? He was perfectly fine after taking the hit. Indeed. He wasn't even the least bit damaged by the raging lightning and the incredible pressure that would rip anyone to pieces several times over. He simply kept walking in the thunderstorm that was her dragon breath. How is he doing this? Some kind of defense skill that I'm unaware of? Did he also have the enchanted item? Is he resistant to lightning? No, even at that. Karina tried to make sense of what she was witnessing, but there was no definite answer entering her head. As she struggled to comprehend this, she realized he was saying something, even while being bombarded by millions of volts of energy. What was he saying? She wanted to know. She had to know. Pshua. As the blasted energy dissolved, a soft hissing sound filled the air. Little buzzes of sparkling electricity in the air echoed occasionally, but the loud explosive crackles had ceased. Justin stood among the red-hot wreckage, his eyes fixed on her as hers were on him. He really isn't damaged at all. I'm immortal, miss. He announced. Even if you hit me with your strongest attack, I won't die. What? A human? Immortal? Even if she didn't see him as a human in the conventional sense, he was still ultimately one. Even dragons couldn't claim to be immortal, yet this fool was claiming it. I also adapt to any attack that hits me once, so I won't be receiving any damage from that dragon breath skill of yours. It all sounded absurd, like he was bluffing, but the look that Justin gave her didn't seem like that of a liar. He was being completely frank with her. And now that we have the pleasantries out of the way, it's time for me to kill you. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Welp, looks like we need one more chapter. Still, Justin has gotten a lot more interesting, hasn't he? Hee. Hollow technique number 7, false endless. It was more akin to a curse than a blessing, considering how it operated on the victim. The soul of the false endless would be in the possession of the hollow technique user, while the body would be in a state between life and death. In essence, while Justin couldn't die, he wasn't particularly alive either. He was undead. His soul was also in the custody of Ader, and that was the only main weakness he had. No matter how much damage his body sustained, he wouldn't die as long as his soul was intact. He would keep recovering, over and over again. He could also perfectly adapt to the damage inflicted on him, which meant no single attack could kill him twice. Of course, it wasn't like this made him invincible. A false endless was far from perfect, and was still subject to a lot of limitations. For one, they could be sealed, controlled, or undergo a perpetual state of suspension. They also weren't automatically immune to attacks. They had to die to an ability before acclimating to its qualities. Still, all of these weaknesses really meant nothing when facing someone who was ignorant of hollow techniques or how a false endless worked. For someone like Justin, in the world of H-Tray, he was akin to an anomaly unlike any other. A shadow of death. You're lying. Boom. Once again, Karina sent out a surge of lightning, but it did no good at all. All her attack managed to do was decimate everything around Justin, with nothing at all affecting him at all. Enough of this charade. Justin muttered, brandishing his blade as he stared hard at the dragon general before him. It's time for my attack. Karina didn't know this, but this would be the first time Justin was fighting a dragon general. He had already killed a lot of commanders during the siege of the dragon camp, but he wasn't fortunate when it came to a general. Belle managed to get her hands on one, though. If I let her fight here, that would only widen the gap between us. I can't let that happen. Despite his powerful qualities as a false endless, he wasn't as powerful as Belle. Still, unlike most undead, he could still level up, so his power was never going to be stagnant. With this opportunity, I should finally be able to reach it just like Belle. A slick purple energy gathered around his blade as he looked at the dragon before him. She was clearly flustered by his complete resistance to her power, which meant she was about to throw something else his way. This left Justin with two options. I can tank the next attack and gain immunity to it, or simply finish things quickly. Normally, if he was facing a normal dragon general in a completely different scenario, he would have opted for the first option. Unfortunately, this situation couldn't allow him to take his time. She's only a dragon general temporarily. I have to act before whatever skill she used runs out, or this would all be for nothing. Plus, they couldn't waste too much time, all things considered. Since that was the case, Justin decided to get serious. Skill activation, silhouette dot. Status window. Name, Justin Baker. Race, undead, F/S3 and N hashtag %5. Class, Dark Assassin, A tier. Level, 297, 44.9% EXP. Life Force, +++. Mana level, 4000, +4000, 2000. Combat ability, 4850, +9000, 2000. Stat points, 0. Skills, exclusive perfect mimic. Silhouette. One with all. Grand perception. Hypnose. F/S3 and N hashtag %5. Skills, non-exclusive flash. Sublimation. Ghostification. Perfect status recovery. Mind transfer. Dark magic. Necromancy. Alignment, chaotic neutral. Additional information. A former human who gave up everything, including his soul, to achieve his goals. He is currently the servant of a despicable entity, and is bound by darkness. Eliminate this abomination. End of information. Karina found herself getting more nervous as time passed in microseconds. She could clearly see that this human was weaker than her, and by all regards she was supposed to win. Yet, what was this unease that kept rising within her? Something felt wrong about this situation. Why? Why? Why did she have this gnawing feeling that she would lose? One look at the students behind her, the ones she had to protect no matter what, told her that such thoughts were nonsense. There was no place in her heart for worries like that. I have to win. For the sake of these survivors, loss is unacceptable. With that thought rushing through her mind, she gathered as much mana as she could at once and activated her absolute elemental magic skill to create the most powerful spell she could muster in such a short time. Absolute Elemental Storm. As she cast the spell, she activated the mana circles within her as well, sending them into overdrive so the quality would exceed regular standards. As expected of someone who taught magic in an academy full of dragons, her execution was flawless. In just a few more seconds, the person in front of her would be reduced to mere ashes. But, then, silhouette. Justin activated his own skill, brandishing his blade as if he was an expert in the art of swords. The moment he uttered that single word, darkness sprang right out of him. Like thin threads or wires of some kind, the blackish-purple darkness danced around him and his blade, flowing like endless worms that were ascending to the heavens. Karina was tempted to raise her guard as soon as she saw this, but she was resolute in her decision to go ahead with her spell. She was confident in her ability to protect everyone after all. Die, filthy human! She roared, sending the amalgamation of all the basic elements as a powerful ray that even exceeded her dragon breath nearly 5 times. This time, the destruction of her foe was inevitable. Swish! One simple slash sent Karina's head falling from her neck. It happened at the same time that the elemental attack dissolved into obscurity as if it had never been cast at all. Just like that, in a single second, the dragon general was dead. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. What an abrupt end, I know. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. Justin is quite up now, ha ha ha. Silhouette was a more advanced form of marionette. The latter was an exclusive skill that Justin had prior to his evolution. It allowed him to manipulate threads made of mana, utilizing them for a variety of purposes. However, as Silhouette, the skill's nature slightly changed. Marionette could be used to control objects by attaching the threads to them, but Silhouette went deeper than that. It could control mana itself. The dark threads were connected to everything around Justin, allowing him to control the mana in the air, or the mana of his enemies. Most of these threads were so thin that they were practically invisible, and the dark ones that could be seen were an amalgamation of hundreds, if not thousands of threads. Thanks to this ability, Justin could rip apart a spell or attack directed at him, not that he would normally need to by simply attaching his threads to them and then controlling it. Of course, this all depended on the scale and intensity of the spell being directed at him. However, considering the fact that Silhouette was an S-tier skill, there were only a few things that could cause him trouble. Karina's spell wasn't one of them. Pure silence filled the entire space as the massive dragon corpse fell to the ground. The heavy thud created a bit of noise, but everything went still immediately after. As her decapitated head lay a small distance from the rest of her body, and the thick blood oozed out, no one said a word. The terrified students watched all of this in silence. They were too stunned to speak. Their instructor, one of the strongest people they had ever met in their whole life, was so easily killed by a human. Not even taking into account the absurdity of the situation, the consequence alone was enough to make them all shiver. Karina was the only reason they were alive, and with her death, came their own assured demise. We're going to die. They began to think. One after the other, the sentiment began to ring in the head of everyone who watched the swift execution take place. We're all going to die. We're going to. Yes. A loud cry echoed from Justin as he raised his fist into the air, displaying excitement which ran in direct contrast to the despair being shown by the students. I did it. I finally got a class upgrade. There was no way these dragons could have known this, but the whole reason Justin wanted to fight Karina was because she had turned into a dragon general. And the only reason he was interested in a general was because of this upgrade. Despite his increasing power, as well as his near-invincible body, he had been shackled so much by his A-tier class. No more. Justin grinned as he looked at the system notification before him. Congratulations. You have advanced to a new class. He had been waiting for this for so long. Belle got her new S-tier class after they were done with the massacre in the dragon camp, and she had been using every opportunity to lord it over him. She got the Archmage class, and Ader said it means she practically has the strongest mage class. At this rate, she's already surpassed Lucielle. Justin knew Belle could have ever made it this far if it wasn't for Ader's constant guidance and support, but he couldn't help but feel competitive once she got a class advancement before him. All of that was in the past now, though. What new class will I get? You have thrown away your humanity for a selfish goal, and have made darkness your only true ally. As a result, your new class is No Life King. Yet. Justin was a little stunned by the new class. No Life King? What's that? He wondered. I thought I would get something that was an advancement of my assassin class, but this has more to do with my status as an undead, doesn't it? He wanted to sigh, but he found that difficult to do with his face still spread out as a smile. You will soon begin the acclimation process. Yeah, Ader mentioned this. Justin's thoughts quickly snapped to reality. Belle had experienced her fair share of acclimation, which simply meant being in a comatose state for a short while, and apparently Ray's coma was partly due to acclimating to his new class. Such was the case when one transcended the limits of A-tier and reached the realm of the absolute. In any case, since it'll happen soon, it's time to round things up here. Justin turned to Belle, who swiftly appeared right next to him. Congrats. I guess. She seemed a little sulky, which made him laugh a little. Belle was meant to be happy for his progress, considering how they were partners and they could be of better use to Ader now, but she couldn't help but feel a little threatened since the boy was going to catch up to her very soon. Let's kill as many of them as we can before it hits. Justin said to her, and she nodded in total agreement. Their focus was turned to the dragons, and the merciless gaze they used to look at the powerless newts made it clear that they stood no chance at all. Once again, this would be a massacre. However, rumble. Perhaps it wasn't too late for a miracle. As soon as what sounded like a thundercloud echoed in the sky, Belle and Justin exchanged knowing glances. Before they could move from their respective positions, though. Two surges of white electricity descended from above in heavenly judgment, landing perfectly on the two who stood there. Pain screams echoed out of their lungs, and that same instant, Justin completely blacked out while Belle clung to her consciousness. Oh? Looks like we have rather durable ones here. A surprised voice came forth, just as soon as the noise of the lightning receded. Indeed. Another voice, this time calm, responded. Two dragons, both of them generals, suddenly appeared in the sky as they watched the entire scene with surprised and calm expressions respectively. They were dressed in pure white, with designs of light blue and hints of gold on their attires. Their styles were different, but it was clear that the two generals were donning some kind of uniform. No matter, they won't be able to hold out for too long now that reinforcements are here. The calm one spoke again, his gaze resting on the crater where Belle was now holding the unconscious Justin. It was clear at that moment that the tide of battle had completely changed. Every student's eyes brightened up the moment they laid eyes on their saber, instantly forgetting the despair they experienced after the death of their instructor. The reason for their relief wasn't merely because more dragons had shown up. It wasn't even because they were dragon generals. A single look at the glowing insignia branded on the chest pockets of their uniform, and their easily recognizable faces told every single student watching what they needed to know. Why? Well, these were the esteemed members of the strongest squad of the Dragon Empire. The first squad of the Frost Dragon Lord. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. The Frost Dragon squad was regarded as the strongest in the Empire. Not only did it consist of dragon generals, it also housed the most powerful general in the Empire, one that was said to be nearing the realm of Lord. Each member of the squad received celebrity status, and it would be impossible for any dragon in the Empire not to recognize them, since they were often the face of the military or the Empire's forces. The squad had remained undefeated for decades, and they had only grown in power since. And now, there's nowhere to run. You're both trapped. The calm man said as he looked at the two enemies of the Empire. It would be a lie to say he wasn't as surprised as his colleague that they were still standing despite the powerful magic used, but he was just very adept at not showing any real emotion. Besides, there was still no real cause for alarm. That lightning was just a warm-up anyway. It looks like they won't be able to take any more, though. The male human was already unconscious, and the female was busy carrying him. She looked more frustrated than worried, and that was probably due to the current state of her partner. I could go on analyzing the situation, but there's no use. We're going to win this. As he thought this, his silvery black hair dancing in the air, he descended to the ground with his colleague. Lester, what do you think? Should I just take care of them myself? The more expressive general asked him. He only responded with a slight glance and a small sigh. What a silly question, Dru. Right now, we should focus on the students who require immediate assistance. That means eliminating this trash is secondary, and should be handled in the fastest way possible. He wanted to say, but everything was a mouthful. Besides, Lester returned his full gaze on the two humans. Rather than eliminating them, it'll be better to incapacitate them and bring them in for questioning. There was no way humans could resist the torture methods of the Empire. They had brought in a lot of them as guinea pigs, and none of them even lasted a minute or two before cracking. That was how fragile their brain was. We should be able to find out why all of this happened, once we interrogate them. As soon as he had this thought, though, a sudden distortion appeared all around the two humans that seemed to be helpless. His eyes twitched a little as he noticed the shocking and instant burst of energy. Bwuum. Space unfolded right there and then, causing a rift to appear around the duo. The instant he noticed this, he recognized what it meant. Dru. You understood. Whoosh. His colleague rushed towards the two, who were already being sucked into the spatial swirl. It seemed like they would slip away any second, and since Dru was the physically fastest of the two, it only made sense that he would be the one to chase after them. But, even he wasn't fast enough. Pshua. For a second, the two dragon generals were silent. They looked at the exact spot where their enemies had stood barely a second earlier, each having varying reactions. Dru was as expected frustrated and annoyed by the fact that his enemy slipped from his grasp. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fist, but made sure not to display anything more damning. As for Lester, he remained calm as he narrowed his eyes on the suspect area. That sudden burst of energy, there was no build-up whatsoever, which means it wasn't a spell cast by those two, and neither was it a skill. Was it an enchanted item? No, even the best of those have slow activation time. That leaves one major possibility. He walked to the part where they stood and tapped the ground with his foot. Rune magic. They laid out a teleportation rune here, and then another rune to conceal the primary one. That's how they were able to teleport with seemingly no build-up. But, how could this be? Did they know we would be coming at this exact moment? Why else would they be in the exact position that they needed to be in to escape? Before we intervened, it seemed like they had the upper hand, so why would they even need such an elaborate rune meant for escape? Leicester thought to himself. The whole thing was suspect. It doesn't seem like there are any more runes around here, and I don't think they're coming back, but, just to be safe, it's better we evacuate. He turned to his partner, Dru, and the latter nodded immediately. Are you students okay? While Dru took care of calming and securing the students, which was their primary mission, Leicester found himself deep in thought. He couldn't get over the two humans who escaped from their grasp. Now that this happened, that expression she made has a completely different meaning. The she in question was Belle, and her frustrated expression had been previously construed to be generated out of desperation. She didn't want to face the two generals alone, and she was bothered that her comrade was knocked unconscious. That was what he initially thought. But now, it seems more like she wanted to fight us on her own, but had to retreat. He sighed and shut his eyes. Am I just overthinking things? Either way, with their task already complete, there was no use to remain here and mull over what could or could not have happened. Besides, since he has been tasked with securing the students in the other camp, he'll surely have more luck with getting a prisoner to interrogate. Of course, that was if he could hold back well enough. We should leave now. Leicester spoke, moving closer to Dru, who was done gathering the students and calming them down. They had been through more horror than many dragons, and at such a young age too. Let's hope even this brings glory to the Empire. Asterisk. 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 A/N. Thanks for reading. Apologies for not uploading yesterday. The internet was completely down.